Hey guys, tonight we begin with the bizarre childhood of Genghis Khan. Frozen rivers, rival clans, and a boy hunted by his own tribe before he even had a horse. So while you're getting comfortable, feel free to tap like and subscribe if this kind of calm, late night history is your thing. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what time it was when you pressed play. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind finds every crack in the reed walls of your family's gear, humming through the seams like a warning. You're wrapped in an old fur, the only warmth between you and the hard-packed earth, but even that smells of damp hide and too many winters. Your mother watches over you with eyes that have already buried children, her hands always busy, braiding, mending, grinding, feeding, and her voice is a quiet thing only raised when the fire sputters out, or when your father, Yasuge, brings news of another alliance or another threat. It is a cold life, a hungry one, and you were born into it with a blood clot in your fist, which some whispered meant greatness, though it seemed more like a curse. The spirits gave you to the world in the harshest of seasons, when even the wolves were lean, and the horses moved slowly through the snow, ribs pushing against their shaggy sides. The others in your tribe, those who followed your father not out of loyalty, but necessity, do not look at you like a blessing. You are just another mouth, another skinny child trying not to die. Your father rides with warriors more often than he's home. When he is home, he smells of horse sweat, smoke, and something sharp, danger, maybe, or just the way men smell when they've seen too much. He teaches you how to tie a bowstring with frozen fingers, how to catch marmots in silence, and how to watch the sky like the Tengri shamans do. He speaks of the great Khan Ambegai, of ancestors chained and killed by the Tatars, of revenge that has passed from mouth to mouth like an heirloom. You don't understand all of it yet, but you nod when you're supposed to, gripping a small knife too heavy for your wrist, and trying to show no fear when a fox call startles the horses. You do not get to be soft. Not in this life. Not in this wind. The Borgigan name means something out here. It drapes you like a tattered robe, noble, but worn thin by the generations. Your clan claims descent from a blue wolf and a doe, born from mountain winds and river spirits. It's a beautiful myth, and sometimes, when the fire crackles right, and the fermented milk hasn't turned your stomach too badly, you almost believe it. You imagine your bones filled with the howl of that ancient wolf. You imagine your feet meant to cross ice and thorny grass barefoot, your lungs built for sharp, high air. And yet, no matter how many stories your father tells, the truth always comes with the hunger. Even at 5 years old, you know hunger is the only constant. It curls in your belly in the quiet hours before dawn. It makes you chew too fast when meat is rare. And it makes you watch your younger siblings when they eat, calculating whether they'd notice if you stole a little extra. Your mother gives you the last of the fermented curds some nights, and lies that she's already eaten. You pretend to believe her, because pretending is easier than knowing. You also know, though no one has said it outright, that if it ever came down to one of you surviving, she would choose you. That's what mothers on the steppe do. And that's what makes it harder. Yasuge, despite his cunning and bloodline, is no true Khan. He commands respect only because he's wily enough to switch sides at the right moment, marry into the right clans, and make the right enemies bleed. But those alliances are brittle things, tied together with words and drinking rituals and the promise of horses. And promises, in this world, last only as long as the last sip of kumi. Even so, your father walks through camp like a man made of iron. You follow him like a shadow, small and silent, watching how he greets men with half-smiles and listens more than he speaks. You see him argue with shamans about omens, and you notice when he keeps a hand on his dagger during those talks. There's something in him that never fully trusts, even the spirits. The world is wide and full of knives. The snow-covered ridges hold more than just goats and the occasional band of raiders. Every tribe is a potential enemy. Every alliance a countdown. Your family moves often, dragging the Jur's curved beams and felt skins from pasture to pasture, always trying to stay one step ahead of rivals or the next hard season. You sleep under stars so bright, they seem to burn through your closed eyelids. You learn to read the direction of wind by how it cuts through the tent. You grow used to horses breathing beside you at night, their thick bodies giving off warmth like low fires. One day, your father brings home a boy with flat cheeks and wary eyes. His name is Jamuka. He is not your blood, but your father says you must treat him like a brother. You don't understand why until later. Your clan needs alliances, and this boy is from a powerful family. Still, you take to him quickly. He knows how to tie a better snare than you. He knows a game where you flick sheep-knuckle bones until one flies like a hawk. He teaches you how to do it, laughing when you miss. In the quiet between chores and long rides, the two of you make oaths in the shadows, mimicking the older warriors. You say you'll never betray each other, no matter what. You mean it, but the world doesn't care about childhood promises. Not in a place like this, where the wolves outside your tent might be less dangerous than the people inside it. While you are still small, too small to ride alone for long stretches or wield a full-sized bow, the future comes galloping across the steppe in the form of poisoned meat and breaking packs. Yasuge dies on a return journey from arranging your marriage. He is poisoned by the tatters during a guest feast, betrayed under the pretense of peace. When the news reaches camp, it doesn't come as a shout or scream. It comes in a silence so thick you feel it before the words are said. Your mother kneels by the fire, her lips pressed shut, her hands frozen on the thread she was spinning. No one says what everyone is thinking. The man who held this family together is gone. Now, without Yasuge, your clan begins to unravel. Allies turn their backs. The Taie Shiad, those who once rode alongside your father, abandon you. They don't kill you outright. That would be too merciful. They simply ride off one morning, taking their horses, weapons, food stores, and any man who doesn't want to starve. The message is clear. You, your mother, your siblings, you're no longer part of the tribe. You are a burden. You are alone. And so begins the second birth of Temujin, the one no one celebrates, the one not into a noble name, but into isolation and the teeth of winter. As the hoofbeats fade and the dust settles, the only thing left to do is survive. And that's where the long hunger truly begins. The silence after the tribe's departure is worse than any battle cry. No horns, no hoofbeats, no thudding drum of riders cresting a hill, just the soft creak of wind tugging at an empty saddle post, and the faint clatter of a forgotten cooking pot rolling across the frozen ground. It takes time for your mind to grasp what's happened. You step outside the skeletal frame of your family's half-collapsed ger and turn slowly, looking out at the trail of hoofprints growing fainter by the hour. You expect someone to return, to say there's been a mistake, but no one comes back. No one ever does. You are only a boy, barely tall enough to lift the front flap of the ger without standing on your toes. And yet, overnight, you've inherited a new role: provider, defender, leader, titles carved not in ceremony, but in hunger. Your mother doesn't cry. She never cries. Instead, she gathers what little is left: a few sacks of cracked millet, a handful of animal hides stiff with salt, and a tiny cache of sour cheese that smells like damp wool. She says it's enough to last a week if you ration carefully. You both know it's a lie. With no herd, no weapons, and no men to help, your family becomes invisible. Outcasts. Not worth trading with, not worth raiding, not even worth naming. Among the Mongols, exile is often a sentence worse than death, because it leaves you living long enough to feel every bruise of the world's indifference. You dig for roots. You chase marmots into holes and lie flat for hours, praying one makes a mistake. You learn how to trap birds with just a length of horsehair and patience. You get good at eating things no one should ever eat. One day, you boil a strip of leather until it softens enough to chew. Your younger brother thinks it's meat. You let him believe it. The landscape begins to feel like it's watching you. The wide sky, once filled with your father's stories of eagles and wolf ancestors, now looms like a ceiling pressed too low. The cold becomes something personal, sliding under your clothes and into your bones. You dream about warmth, not fire, but the heat of a horse's body, the smell of its breath on your face. Even your dreams are frugal now, trimmed down to essentials. Your mother does what she can. She weaves, she barters, she bends to hardship like a reed in a river, never breaking, only swaying. She teaches you how to ferment Mari's milk if you ever get a Mari again. She shows you where to press along the neck of a rabbit to kill it with kindness. But there's a limit to what any one woman can do with 5 hungry children and no allies. You grow leaner. You count ribs, not on animals, but on your siblings. And the silence around the camp grows thicker, as if the world has agreed that your family no longer belongs. In this desolate stretch of time, food becomes a ritual. Each bite is shared by eye contact, an unspoken language of who needs it more. Your younger brother Begder, taller and stronger, begins to act like a second father. He tries to take charge, to issue orders, to claim the bigger piece. He says he's just trying to keep you all alive. But you don't like the way he looks at your mother, like he thinks she owes him something for the help. It festers between you. You and your full brother Kassar speak about it in low tones over dying fires. You whisper plans, not for murder, but for escape. Still, every conversation drifts closer to that darker edge. Begder grows more aggressive, more certain that the rules of the past no longer apply. He keeps the best food. He eats in silence. He challenges your every move. Until one evening, after a fight over a strip of dried meat, the decision is made. No one speaks afterward. You bury the body far enough away that scavengers won't come near the gear. Your mother knows. Of course she knows. But she says nothing. She just keeps working, weaving, boiling, watching. You wonder if she blames you, but her silence is neither angry nor cold. It's more like the silence of the wind, constant, mournful, too large to argue with. You wonder if she ever expected her sons to survive this long in the first place. And then, one spring morning, you see a rider. A real one, leather-clad, armed, face hard as sun-dried meat. You don't recognize him, but you know his kind. He's from a neighboring tribe, a scout perhaps, or a thief with too much time on his hands. He looks over your pitiful camp and turns away without a word. He doesn't see a threat, doesn't see a future. And for some reason, that stings worse than if he had drawn a blade. That evening, your mother tells you it's time to leave this place. Not the steppe, you'll never leave the steppe, but the particular valley, the bones of the old camp, the echo of hoofbeats long faded. She says the spirits are tired of your sorrow. You believe her. You pack what little you have. An axe head with no handle, a cracked pot, a blanket more whole than fabric. Kassar leads one of the younger children on foot, while your mother carries another on her back. You walk for 3 days without seeing another soul. And then you find it. A bend in the riverbank, a thicket of half-dead trees, a clearing just big enough for a new start. But before you can rebuild anything, you hear them again, hoofbeats in the distance. And this time, they're not passing by. They're coming straight for you. The hoofbeats don't bring salvation. They bring tension, like the air just before lightning breaks open the sky. When the riders appear through the haze of dust, they aren't warriors with banners or traders with goods. They're young, rough, hungry, boys only a few years older than you, but already hardened into men by the kind of choices no one should have to make. They're Tei Shiad, from the same tribe that abandoned you. But they're not here to finish what was started. They've simply heard there's a mother and a few children scraping by near the riverbank, and they've come to see if anything's worth taking. You greet them with nothing in your hands but your eyes steady. You try to stand like your father once did, spine straight, shoulders still. They smirk when you don't flinch. There's nothing here to steal, but that doesn't mean they'll leave empty-handed. One of them eyes the pot hanging over the fire. Another squints at your sister, at your mother, at the spot where your small stockpile of salted roots is buried under a stone. But your younger brother, Kassar, has already moved around behind the tent, where a makeshift bow waits under a pile of furs. He's never fired it in anger, but he's ready now. The riders sense this, somehow. They sense that despite your poverty, you're not entirely broken. In the end, they take nothing. One laughs as he rides away, calling you Little Khan of Nothing. You don't shout back. You simply watch. Something changes that day, though. A thread pulls taut between you and your brother. Not spoken, but deeply felt. You are no longer simply boys. You are defenders of your own. The weeks that follow pass with more quiet urgency. Every meal is a calculation. Every fire must be small and smokeless. You can't afford to attract attention, not from strangers, and not from spirits either. But tension grows inside the camp, not from the outside threats, but from within. Kassar is your shadow in every task, but your half-brother Belgatay becomes a thorn. He doesn't like taking orders. He doesn't like sharing. The moment comes when a rabbit's snare turns up full, and the meat is already roasting by the time you return. Belgatay claims it was his trap, though you know it was Kassar's. The argument is short, sharp, and ends with Kassar's nose bloodied and your patience worn thin. The next few days are sour. Meals are eaten in silence. Even your mother's face turns colder, more distant, like she's bracing for something. It's not the first time food has sparked tension. It won't be the last. But the dynamic has shifted. There is no father to make decisions. No elder to lay down a ruling. The burden now falls on you, though no one said it aloud. You feel it in every look, every hesitation before a bite of dried roots or boiled marrow. And Belgatay knows it too. One dusk, as the fire crackles low, he speaks up in front of the others. He says you think you're already a Khan, that you act like your father, but can't feed anyone, that he should be the one deciding how food gets shared. Your siblings freeze. Even the youngest understands the threat in his voice. You ask him what he wants. Belgatay says he wants respect. He wants the best cut of meat. He wants decisions to go through him. You stand slowly. He reaches for the bone-handled knife at his waist. And that's when it ends. You don't even remember pulling your own knife. Just the sudden closeness, the struggle, the look in his eyes. It's not hatred, it's disbelief. As if he truly thought he could speak like that, can walk away whole. Kassar tackles him from the side. The knife falls. Your mother doesn't shout. She only says his name once. It's enough. The fight ends with Belgatay spitting blood into the fire and storming off into the night. No one sleeps well. You keep a hand on your knife through the dark hours. When morning comes, Belgatay is gone. So is the last of the meat. You find the bones near the riverbank, picked clean. Whether he left to join another tribe or simply wandered into the wild, you never learn. What matters is that now there are only 5 of you left, and the old cracks in your family have turned into fault lines. The next days are quiet. There's no one to challenge your decisions. But power earned this way leaves a taste in your mouth, like cold iron or the burnt fat of bad meat. You don't feel victorious. You feel tired, wary. The role you've claimed is not one you enjoy. It just fits like a coat passed down too many times. It smells of blood and desperation. Still, you push forward. You lead hunting trips with Khazar. You build stronger windbreaks around the camp. You even fashion new arrows from splintered wood and bird feathers. You're not thriving, but you're surviving. And that, for now, feels like enough. One night, as you sit beside the fire watching smoke curl into the stars, your mother hands you a pouch of herbs and dried roots. She says your father once carried the same. She says it's time you begin thinking beyond the next meal. And that's when she brings up the girl your father once promised you to, Bert, from the Anjarat tribe. You remember her vaguely, all long braids and shy glances from across a crowded campfire. You haven't seen her in years, but your mother believes it's time to rekindle the bond. A marriage could mean more than a wife. It could mean alliances, horses, safety. You don't feel ready. You're still a boy with too much blood on his hands and not enough meat in his belly. But you nod, because part of you knows she's right. You need more than just endurance to survive this life. You need ties that bind tighter than blood. So you gather your brothers, pack your few belongings, and prepare for a journey. The road ahead winds across unforgiving steppe and uncertain loyalties. But somewhere out there, beyond the low hills and bitter winds, is a girl who might just be the first step toward rebuilding something bigger than this broken family. The path to the Anjarat camp is long and exposed. With no horses of your own, your family travels on foot, moving through open plains where the grass cuts your ankles and the wind never quite stops whispering. Every night, you sleep in half-dug hollows with furs piled on top, hoping the chill won't seep too deeply into your bones. You've grown accustomed to hardship, but this journey adds a new kind of pressure. It's not just about surviving anymore. It's about returning to the world of tribes and alliances with something to offer. And that something is you. When you finally reach the Anjarat, they welcome you more kindly than expected. Bert's father remembers your father's promise, and though he eyes your thin arms and travel-worn clothes, he doesn't laugh. Instead, he offers you a bride price arrangement that will take years to repay, and you accept it without hesitation. There's a feast. Not a grand one, but enough food to make you slightly dizzy. Bert barely speaks during the ceremony, though her eyes meet yours once or twice across the fire, and you recognize something there. Curiosity, maybe, or determination. She's not afraid. That's more than you can say for yourself. For a short while, you taste what peace might feel like. Bert returns with you to the riverbank, and the air seems warmer. She doesn't complain, even when the wind finds every seam, or when the firewood runs low. She's used to better, but she adapts quickly, weaving reeds into mats and boiling stones to keep the cooking pot warm longer. You begin to imagine a future. It isn't bright or luxurious, but it's real. And then, just as the snow starts to melt into spring, it ends. It begins with barking dogs in the night and a low whistle that makes your scalp prickle. Bitaya Shiad again, but not scavengers this time. These are warriors, not boys. Their armor is mismatched, their faces familiar in the worst way. They ride directly into camp, not bothering to sneak or shout. They know there's nothing here that can stop them. You grab a knife. Kassar reaches for the bow, but there are too many. Within seconds, you're forced to the ground, your arms twisted behind your back, a knee pressing into your spine. Bert screams, and you can do nothing. They take you, not all of you, but just you. They're not interested in killing. They want something more humiliating, more personal. You're not just a rival. You're a symbol of defiance. And that makes you worth breaking slowly. They bind your neck with a wooden collar, a crude yoke with two horizontal boards that force your head forward, your shoulders hunched. It's awkward, painful, humiliating. You can't lie down, can't turn your head. Even drinking becomes a challenge. They tie your hands in front and loop a rope to your ankles so you can't run. They march you east, across scrubland and dried riverbeds, laughing as you trip and stumble. You don't cry. Not once. You save your strength for walking, for breathing, for remembering every face. The camp they bring you to is larger than yours ever was. Warriors mill around like wolves at rest, always alert, always dangerous. You're put to work immediately. Not noble work, not even skilled labor. You carry water, drag dung, feed goats, empty latrines. At night, they tie you to a post like a wayward dog. You're offered scraps, bits of old meat, sour milk, things even the dogs sniff and leave behind. The collar never comes off. It rubs your skin raw, leaves a rash that scabs and bleeds. But the shame cuts deeper than the wood. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't ask questions. You learn who's cruel and who's just bored. One boy your age, Targutai, makes a sport of tossing pebbles at your collar when you kneel to drink. Another finds it amusing to drop his food just out of your reach, forcing you to crawl in the dirt while others laugh. You keep your face blank, not because you feel nothing, but because you know they want to see your anger. They want to see you break. But there are moments, quiet ones. An older man, scarred from old battles, hands you a piece of clean bread one morning and doesn't say a word. A woman mending boots leaves a second pair near your post, pretending it was a mistake. These aren't acts of rebellion. They're too small for that. But they keep you from slipping entirely into despair. Your only constant is the sky. No one can take that from you. Even with your head bent under the yoke, you find ways to look up at night. You watch the stars move slowly across the blackness, and you remember the stories your father told. The wolf ancestor, the blue sky spirit. You wonder if those spirits can even see you now, buried under so much shame and filth. But still, you look. Still, you hope. And then one day, there's a shift. A group of warriors returns from a raid, drunk on kumi and victory. You're ordered to carry their gear, saddles, bows, skins soaked with blood. As you stagger under the weight, one of the men trips you. You fall hard. The collar digs into your jaw. Your knees hit stone. You stay down, waiting for the kick, but it never comes. Instead, a voice speaks, soft, deliberate, and unfamiliar. I wouldn't treat a dog like that. You glance up as best you can. The man is older, with a face carved by wind and time. He's not from this tribe. A guest, maybe, an emissary. He steps forward, eyes you like someone inspecting a half-ruined tool. Then, without a word, he walks away. But from that moment, the beatings stop. The jokes quiet. No one says why. Maybe the guest said something. Maybe the tribe simply grew bored. Maybe they're preparing to kill you. The silence is suspicious, but also a relief. That night, as the fire burns low and the camp settles into uneasy sleep, a boy you barely recognize slips near your post. He whispers your name, not mockingly, not cruelly, just a name. He unties your feet first, then your hands. Then he pulls a wedge from the collar and slides it off your neck. It hits the ground with a muffled thud. Your body sags. You feel like you might weep, but you don't. You just breathe. Run west, the boy says. Stick to the gullies. Don't stop until the river. You don't ask why. You just run. The night air cuts your lungs like broken glass. Your muscles scream. You fall more than once. But you keep going, crawling when your legs give out, dragging yourself over dry scrub and sharp rocks. Every sound behind you could be hoofbeats. Every flicker of wind could be a pursuing scout. But you don't look back. And somewhere before dawn, you find it, a river, slow and dark, lined with tall reeds. You slip into it, letting the cold wrap around your bruised limbs like a second skin. You crawl into the mud under a willow's bent branches and lie still. You hear nothing but your own ragged breath and the slow swirl of water. You don't sleep. You don't eat. You just stay there, wrapped in silence, until the sun begins to rise, and the first bird calls crack open the sky like a promise. The world smells of river mud, old reeds, and something sweetly rotting. You lie beneath the bent willow branches with your face pressed to the earth, waiting for a sound that never comes. No hoofbeats, no shouted orders, no war cries. Just the rustle of wind through grass and the gentle splashes of fish breaking the surface. You don't know how long you've been here. Time has loosened its grip. All you know is that your body aches in every corner, and your mind keeps drifting in and out of focus, pulled between exhaustion and the primal instinct to stay alive. Your hands are swollen from the ropes. The skin around your wrists has peeled in places, tender and cracked. Your legs are stiff, feet numb from cold and overuse. When you try to sit up, your back protests with a noise you don't dare make out loud. You ease yourself to a crouch, peeking through the tangle of reeds. The sky is still pale with early light. No riders in sight, no dogs, no horns. You decide to move while it's still quiet. Slow and careful, like a fox nursing a broken leg. You follow the curve of the riverbank, keeping low, your eyes scanning the hills for any sign of movement. The mud pulls at your feet, each step a squelching gamble, but you prefer the pull of the earth to the bite of a blade. You think of your mother, your brothers. Bert, are they still where you left them? Have they assumed you're dead? Worse, are they dead because of you? The questions crawl through your mind like ants, but you push them aside. One thought at a time. First, survive. When the sun climbs high enough to bring heat, you find a patch of tall grass and collapse inside it. You drink from the river with both hands, though it burns your throat. The cold helps. The water tastes of clay and algae, but it's yours. No one's dangling it just out of reach. You eat what little you can. 2 beetles, a handful of bitter berries, and a sprig of something you hope isn't poisonous. Your stomach revolts, but you hold it down. That night, the moon rises fat and yellow over the steppe, casting a soft glow on the grasslands like spilled milk. You walk beneath it, barefoot and silent. You remember the stories your father told you about the moon being a spirit's eye, watching over travelers. You hope he was right. You whisper thanks to it, just in case. The wind has picked up, but it's warm now, the kind that carries scent far and wide. You hope it doesn't carry yours to anyone hunting. By the 3rd day, you begin to feel human again. The swelling in your hands is down. You find a thicket of wild onions and chew them raw. You make a crude wrap for your feet out of reeds and scrap cloth from your tunic. The sky above feels bigger now, not because it has changed, but because you have. You've known hunger, but not like this. You've known humiliation, but never with such weight. And you've known escape, but never earned it like this. You begin tracking by habit, reading hoofprints in dried mud, watching birds for signs of human movement. You stay hidden during the day and travel at dusk, a moving shadow in the tall grass. You pass an abandoned camp one night, cold ashes, a half-rotted saddlebag, a knife with a cracked hilt. You take the knife. It's not much, but it's something. You sleep beside it with your hand wrapped around the handle. The dreams return, strange and slow. Sometimes your father speaks, but his words are warped, twisted by wind and memory. Sometimes Burke peers, standing beside the river, hair like black silk, eyes unreadable. She doesn't speak in the dream. She just looks at you, waiting. You wake each time with your heart pounding, unsure whether it's from fear or grief. On the 5th night, you come upon a smoke trail curling into the sky. It's thin, cautious, someone trying not to be seen, which means they might be worth trusting. Or at least not shooting you on sight. You circle wide, watching from a ridge. There's a fire, small and controlled. 2 gares sit nestled in a grove of trees. Horses graze nearby. And then you see him, the boy, the one who set you free. He's tending the fire with his back to the wind, his movements quick and practiced. You don't know his name. You never asked. But the moment you see him, you understand something important. You are not alone. Not entirely. And maybe you never were. You approach slowly, knife sheathed. When you're close enough to be seen, you whistle softly, the kind your father taught you, meant to calm horses and signal peace. The boy jerks up, eyes wide. Then, as he recognizes you, he nods once. No words, just a gesture, like he knew you'd make it. He brings you inside the smaller ger, offers you a bowl of soup that tastes like salted heaven, and pours you a cup of sour mare's milk that burns your throat on the way down. It's the best thing you've ever tasted. You eat slowly, like the food might disappear if you move too fast. You sleep that night on a mat of dry reeds, the fire's warmth brushing your face. And for the first time in what feels like years, you do not dream of collars or cages. In the morning, you learn his name, Sorkoktani, and that he is not just some boy with a conscience. He is the nephew of a minor chieftain, sent to observe the Tayashiad for signs of weakness. He risked everything to free you, not out of pity, but because he believed you might be worth the trouble. You're not dead yet, he says, handing you a slice of dried goat meat. That usually means something. You thank him, and he waves it off like it doesn't matter. But it does. You stay with him a few more days, long enough to regain strength, long enough to plan. You don't want to hide anymore, not from tribes, not from fate. You want to go home, not just to your family, but to yourself. The self that was buried under shame and splinters and hunger. And so, with the collar gone, with a borrowed horse beneath you and a blade at your hip, you ride west with the wind in your face and the river at your back. You ride toward Bert. The horse beneath you is small, but sure-footed, the kind bred for stamina rather than speed. It carries you through open fields of whispering grass, past the charred remains of old campsites and the bleached bones of animals long forgotten. You ride without ceremony, without entourage. Just a boy with a knife, a scarred wrist, and a name whispered only in the wind. You don't know what waits for you back at the riverbank, but you know you have to return. There is no future without reckoning. You arrive at dusk. The sky glows orange behind the hills, casting long shadows over the small camp your family built in your absence. The ger is still standing. Smoke curls from its top flap, thin and steady. You dismount and wait at the edge of the clearing, letting the horse graze while you watch. You don't want to rush this moment. You listen for familiar voices. Then, from inside, you hear Kassar's sharp laugh, too quick to be practiced, too loud to be staged. Relief floods your chest so fast it hurts. When you step into the firelight, Kassar leaps to his feet. Your mother drops a clay bowl. Bert turns toward you slowly, eyes wide but unreadable. You look like a ghost, mud-caked clothes, sunken cheeks. A boy who walked out of his own grave. But you're alive, and that's enough for now. There are no embraces, no cries of joy. Just quiet nods and one long silence where everyone remembers how easily this reunion might not have happened. Later, after you've eaten your fill and washed in the river, your mother pulls you aside. Her hands hover near your shoulders, unsure whether to rest there or not. She studies your face like a shaman reading bones. You tell her only what she needs to know, that you escaped, that you didn't return alone, that there's still time to rebuild. She doesn't ask questions. She just nods once and says, "Then we must act before fate changes its mind." The next morning, the air is cool and still, the river moving lazily along its usual bend. You and Bert sit together under the open sky. She hasn't said much, not since your return. But she hasn't looked away either. There's no ceremony, no feast, just a quiet agreement made between two people, who have seen enough of the world to stop asking it for kindness. You both stand inside the ger as your mother lays down a thin wool mat and brews a small pot of herbal tea. Kassar stands at the flap, keeping watch, though for what you're not sure. A necklace is brought out, an old one, carved from bone and colored glass beads. Your father gave it to your mother when they wed. Now it's tied around Bert's neck, with fingers still trembling slightly from fatigue. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't smile. But her hands find yours, and she holds them with surprising strength. You promise her shelter, protection, loyalty. She promises the same. There are no witnesses beyond your family. No chieftains. No priests. Just the river murmuring outside, the fire crackling low, and the sound of your own breathing as you bind yourselves to each other, not with titles, but with will. That night, you lie awake beside her on the mat of reeds and wool, listening to the soft exhale of her breath. It feels fragile, this new beginning, like a tent pitched in a storm. But it is yours. No one gave it to you. You built it from scraps of shame and memory and hunger. And even in its uncertainty, it is better than silence. In the days that follow, Bert proves herself more than a partner. She is a planner, a voice of reason, a steady hand when your temper threatens to take over. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't bend easily. She speaks of alliances, of future strength, of rebuilding not just a family, but something greater. It's strange how quickly the idea grows in your mind, not just of survival, but of command. But just as new roots begin to take hold, the past stirs once again. One morning, while tending the goats, you spot smoke on the horizon. Not from firewood, from many campfires. Moving, organized, a group, heading south. Riders, armed, you know what it means. Bert sees it too and doesn't hesitate. We need allies, she says. And you understand. The world doesn't wait for boys to finish healing. It demands action now and always. And so, with a marriage sealed and smoked in silence, with your body still sore from the collar's bite, and your name barely whispered beyond your own family's lips, you begin again. Not as the starving son of an outcast, but as something harder, colder, and more dangerous. You are Temujin, and for the first time, your path leads not to hiding, but to power. From here, the road will twist toward betrayal, blood oaths, and the first flicker of empire. The grass is damp beneath your boots as you walk the old hunting trail, the kind that winds along the ridges where the wind never stops pulling at your sleeves. You know this trail well, too well. It's where you and Jamuka used to race on stolen ponies, daring each other to jump ditches and ride through thornbrush without flinching. You remember how he used to laugh without worry, all teeth and wind in his hair, like nothing on this earth could ever catch him. You haven't seen him in years, not since your father died, and the tribe scattered like dry leaves across the steppe. But word came recently, quiet but sure. Jamuka has gathered a following, a big one. So now you ride not toward safety, but toward a meeting that could go either way, brotherhood rekindled or a quiet death beneath familiar trees. You're not riding alone. Kassar rides behind you on a lean gray horse, sharpening a small dagger as he watches the horizon with eyes that don't blink enough. He's grown into his skin these past months, leaner, harder, his quietness now edged with caution. Behind him come two more, young men from a nearby clan who offered their loyalty without asking too many questions. You didn't promise them riches, only that following you might lead to more than just scraping by. That seemed enough. You find Jamuka's camp, pitched beside a low stream, in the crook of a valley, with good grazing and a view that stretches for miles. The gers are arranged in a semicircle, like a jaw full of teeth, and horses roam just beyond, hobbled but not tethered. The guards see you, but don't move aggressively. They've been expecting you. Or maybe they just assume you wouldn't be stupid enough to walk into a trap. He spots you from across the clearing and doesn't reach for his blade. That's a good start. Jamuka's taller now, broader across the shoulders, dressed in soft leather and fur-lined boots that speak of regular meals and loyal men. But his smile is the same, wide, a little crooked, and always just on the edge of mockery. You're not sure whether it's meant for you or the world at large. Temujin, he says, as if trying your name on for size. The little wolf returns. You dismount and approach slowly. No handshakes. No embraces. Just a moment of long eye contact, and something older than either of you passing between your spines. A thread of shared hunger, hardship, and the ghosts of half-starved childhoods. He leads you to the fire pit at the center of the camp. The stew simmering there smells of lamb and wild onions. You try not to stare at it too greedily. Jamuka motions for bowls to be brought, and when you sit down cross-legged beside him, you eat in silence. You speak little, but there's comfort in that. Old habits don't die quickly. Later that night, under a sky thick with stars and smoke, Jamuka produces a shallow bronze bowl. It's dented, darkened with age, but you recognize it immediately. His father's, the one used for oath ceremonies when warriors pledged loyalty or vengeance. He places it between you and draws a thin-bladed knife from his belt, the kind used for cutting fingers and fate. You remember how this works? He asks, and his tone is light, but not joking. You do. You remember too well. The others step back. A quiet forms. Even the horses seem to still. You both cut the palms of your hands. Not deeply, just enough to sting. Enough to mark. You press your hands together over the bowl, letting your blood mix. It drips slowly into the bronze, cooling like a dark mirror. The warmth of it is oddly comforting. Jamuka begins the old words. They are formal, clumsy in your mouth. Words that predate kingdoms and borders. You vow to stand beside each other in battle, to protect each other's kin in death, to divide spoils fairly, to never draw a blade without warning. The oaths sound noble. They also sound dangerous, because if broken, they mark you forever, not just as a traitor, but as a cursed soul under the eternal blue sky. When it's done, Jamuka lifts the bowl and drinks. You do the same. It tastes of iron and smoke. You don't flinch. When you lower the bowl, you hear murmurs of approval from the men watching. To them, it's not just a performance. It's the first real sign that something bigger might finally take shape. Later, you and Jamuka sit apart from the others. Just the two of you, and the fire casting long shadows on your faces. He talks about the future with the ease of someone who's already imagined it 1,000 times. He sees a confederation of tribes, a council of nobles, a unified Mongol identity wrapped in banners and ceremony. You nod, but your thoughts are different. You think of roads guarded by archers, of signal fires across the steppe, of enemies flanked before they know they're being watched. You dream of something leaner, sharper, less golden, more inevitable. Still, the goals align, for now. The next morning, you ride together to the camp of a minor chieftain, the Cadogan, who controls a narrow valley filled with good horses and stubborn old warriors. Jamuka does the talking, offering protection and trade. You watch the old Khan's face, catching the flicker in his eyes as he considers the offer. You can tell he's tempted, not because of the politics, but because of the two of you, young, allied, and clearly not going away. By sunset, they've agreed to a loose alliance. They give you 3 horses and 2 carts of dried meat as a show of goodwill. On the way back, Jamuka laughs until tears gather at the corners of his eyes. Did you see his face? That wrinkled toad hasn't been impressed since the last comet. You laugh too, but inside, you feel something colder. Power is rising, not just around you, but inside you. You're no longer a starving boy in the mud. You're something else now, and people are beginning to notice. That night, as the camp settles, you lie awake on a mat near the fire. Jamuka sleeps nearby, snoring softly. His knife belt rests on the floor between you. Close, trusted. And yet, you wonder what would happen if you reached for it. Not now. Not yet. But you've seen how men change once power grows within them. And you've seen how blood oaths, once sacred, can sour like spoiled milk. For now, though, you ride side by side. Two boys from the same past, bound by fire and blood. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the Murkets are stirring, and fate is sharpening its blade. The first sign is silence. Not the peaceful kind that settles over a calm night, but the unnatural quiet that blankets a place too suddenly. You return to camp from a short hunt, 3 hairs slung across your saddle, the sky pinking with dusk only to find the smoke from the fire already cold, the flap of your gare wide open, and your brother pacing like a dog with his hackles raised. No one is talking. Not your mother, not Kassar, not the other 2 men who ride with you now. Their faces are stiff, their hands tight on their blades, as if speech might shatter whatever thin layer of reality remains. It takes a moment to understand. The fire is cold because no one has tended it. The ground is marked with fresh hoofprints, not your own, and the pot of rice you left out is overturned, trampled into the mud. Bert is gone. No fight, no screams, no bodies, just the strange emptiness left behind when something precious is taken quickly and with purpose. You call her name once, twice, but the wind carries your voice away like a joke you weren't in on. One of the riders spits. Murkets, he says with a bitterness that reaches his toes. I'd stake my life on it. You don't have to ask how he knows. The Murkets don't fight like the others. They're methodical, quiet, patient. They prefer to strike when their enemy's back is turned, when the children are gathering firewood and the warriors are chasing deer. And they take women not just for vengeance, but for insult. It's how they claim dominance. And this wasn't random. This was personal. You remember then. Your father, Yasuge, once stole a wife from the market. Bert is their answer. You sit down on a cold stone, the hair still slung across your shoulder, the blood dripping onto the earth unnoticed. The world narrows. You taste ash in your mouth. Kassar begins shouting at no one, at everyone, accusing, blaming, demanding action. But you sit, still, silent, thinking. Your oath with Jamuka wasn't just words. He has men, horses, steel. You stood together before a fire and drank each other's blood. That has to mean something. But asking for help also means admitting that you're vulnerable, that the cracks in your armor go deeper than you've let on. You hate that. But you hate what the Murkets have done even more. Before dawn, you ride. You leave Kassar behind to guard the camp and ride hard with 2 of your men toward Jamuka's camp, the wind slapping your face like a rebuke. Your horse breathes heavy beneath you, foam gathering at the corners of its mouth, but you don't slow. Every hoofbeat is a heartbeat. Every gust of dust a reminder that she is not here. When you arrive, you don't bother with pleasantries. You stride into Jamuka's gare, breath ragged, hair wild, and say only, "They took her." He doesn't ask who. He doesn't need to. Within an hour, 20 men are mounted. Within 2, that number doubles. Jamuka is many things. Arrogant, political, sometimes even cruel. But when he gives his word, he means it. That night, he rides beside you, dressed for war, his bow across his back and his eyes sharp as obsidian. They'll be hiding in the Orkhon Valley, he says. It's thick with forest. They'll think we won't chase them into the trees. You nod. You haven't said much since she was taken. Words feel thin now, useless. You think only of Bert, of how she braided her hair that morning, of the way she squinted into the wind when gathering water, of the quiet warmth she gave off without trying. And now she's in the hands of the Murkets, who see her not as a woman, not even as a wife, but as a symbol to be broken. You ride for 3 days. The steppe shifts beneath you, turning from dry grass to marshy valley, and then to a wide plain hemmed in by distant mountains. You barely sleep. When you do, you dream of cages, of Bert calling your name and you unable to move. You wake each time with your hand around your knife. On the 4th morning, you find signs. A bit of cloth snagged on a tree root, the bones of a fire still warm, the smell of horses, dozens of them. You dismount and run your fingers over the earth, the way your father once taught you. Hoof prints heading north, but not fast, not panicked. They think they've already won. You catch up to them near a shallow ravine, where the trees grow thick and the light filters through like broken glass. You don't charge blindly. You and Jamuka plan it like wolves, flanking, distracting, herding them toward open ground. You want them to see you. You want them to know who is coming. When the moment arrives, it's fast and vicious. Arrows first, slicing through the canopy like dry whispers. Then horses, screaming. You rush into the fray with your blade drawn and no thought of self-preservation. A Merkit warrior lunges at you, but you duck low and slice upward, catching him off guard. Another grabs your arm, and you drive your elbow into his throat. You don't stop. You can't. Then, in the chaos, you see her. She's tied behind one of their gears, half shielded by a stack of supplies. Her hair is loose, her face drawn, but she's alive. Her eyes meet yours and widen, but she doesn't cry out. She knows better. You fight your way to her, cutting a path with muscle and instinct. When you reach her, your hands are shaking. Not from fear, but fury. You slice the rope with a trembling blade and pull her up. She leans into you for half a breath, and that's all the time you allow. There's still danger. You get her onto a horse, slap the flank, and shout for one of your men to guard her. She's whisked away just as another wave of Merkits crashes toward you. But this time, you're not outnumbered. Jamuka's men press them from the other side. By nightfall, the battle is over. The Merkits flee in every direction. Some are caught. Some vanish into the trees. But the message is clear. You are not a boy anymore. You are a name they will remember. And Burke has been returned not by luck, but by will. That night, you build a fire of your own. Bert sits nearby, wrapped in a heavy cloak. She says little. You do not press her. Some things are shared only when they're ready. But her hand finds yours under the fur, and she does not let go. The stars above are bright, sharp, watching. The kind of stars that don't blink. And somewhere beneath them, a quiet shift has begun. Something deeper than vengeance. Something more enduring than a blood oath. The camp is silent again, but this time it's a good silence. The kind that comes after blood has cooled, after firelight has danced its last, and after every blade has been wiped clean. The Merkits are gone. The horses that survived graze quietly. The wounded are resting, the dead already wrapped in blankets and placed beneath watchful trees. And in the middle of it all, just outside the soft circle of firelight, Bert sleeps beneath a thick layer of furs, her breath steady, her brow no longer creased with fear. You sit nearby, elbows on your knees, staring at the coals. You haven't slept since the rescue. Every time you close your eyes, you see the fight again. Not just the killing, but the way she looked at you through the ropes. Not with fear, not with hope, but with a kind of trust that felt heavier than any sword. She knew you'd come. That's what hits you hardest. That despite the odds, she waited for you. The others are already retelling it. Around the fires, the men murmur and exaggerate, turning each charge into a tale, each wound into a badge of glory. Someone says you cut down 5 men just to reach her. Someone else swears you rode straight through a burning tent. You don't correct them. You just let the stories grow, because you understand now that the story is half the war. What people believe about you matters more than what actually happened. Chamuka watches you from across the fire, chewing dried meat and saying little. He's letting you have this one. He led the battle, gave the orders, picked the ground, but you're the one who took back his stolen wife. You're the one they're calling Can around the edges of their cups. You're not the same boy who took that oath, Chamuka says quietly, his voice low so no one else hears. You don't answer. Because he's right. In the days that follow, the story spreads faster than any rider. Traders carry it across the steppe. Farmers repeat it at gatherings. By the time you return to your riverbank camp, you're already halfway to legend. And Bert, though quieter than before, walks beside you with her chin lifted and her hands steady. She doesn't shrink from the stares. She wears her silence like armor. Kassar greets you with disbelief, and a grin so wide it nearly cracks his face. Your mother nods once and touches Bert's cheek. No tears, no speeches, just that firm hand and the way she says, "You brought her back. Good." But there's a new tension now, something shifting beneath the surface. You see it in how the older men look at you, how they step aside when you pass, how they lower their eyes without meaning to. You've crossed some invisible line. You're not just a survivor anymore. You're a threat. One night, weeks after the battle, a small group of riders appears on the horizon, members of the Jurkin clan, distant cousins by blood. They come not with blades, but with gifts. Dried fish, thick blankets, a carved wooden bow. Their leader dismounts, bows, and says simply, "We heard what you did. We'd like to share your fire." You glance at Kassar. He shrugs. And just like that, you have your first alliance not sealed by marriage or blood, but by reputation alone. More follow. A trickle, then a flow. Minor bands, exiled warriors, herders tired of weak chieftains, they begin to drift toward you. You don't promise gold. You don't claim visions from the sky. You just offer meat, safety, and a plan. You speak clearly and seldom. You listen more than you talk. And when someone tests you, when one man challenges your authority in front of the fire, you beat him to the ground and leave the decision of mercy to Bert. She says he should live, but that his bow should be burned. You follow her lead. The others watch and learn. The riverbank grows crowded. The Gare is no longer a lonely hut in the grass. It's the center of something taking shape. You hold council beneath the stars. You teach young boys how to string a bow. You send riders west to trade salt for steel. And every night, before sleep, you trace the lines of what this could become. Not just a camp, not just a tribe, a force. But one thing weighs heavier than the rest. You have not yet answered the story with truth. Bert has not spoken of what happened while she was held. You've not asked. You've told yourself you were waiting, that the right moment hadn't come. But the truth is simpler. You're afraid of what she might say. It's not shame. It's the raw ache of helplessness. Of knowing there was a stretch of days when your blood oath meant nothing, when she was alone, tied, silenced. And if she carries pain now, she carries it well. Her silence is not hollow. It's practiced, intentional. One evening, as you sit beside her while she combs her hair with fingers still calloused from years of work, she speaks first. They didn't hurt me the way you think. You don't look at her. You let her speak. I kept my head low. I kept my mouth shut. I told them my husband was coming. She pauses. I think they believed me. You nod once, unsure what else to do. And then she adds softer. But I want you to stop imagining it. You carry too much already. You breathe in slowly. The fire crackles nearby. You don't say thank you, because she would hate that. You just place your hand over hers and hold it for a long while. The story of her rescue becomes your myth, but the real rescue, the one that matters, is this: that she came back, and she still chooses to stay. And now, the steppe begins to listen. The Te Shihad take note. The Jadarin clan sends a scout, and the Karite, led by Togrul Khan, your father's old ally, sends word that he wishes to speak. Not every door opens by force. Some open because you've become too large to ignore. And so, with Bert at your side and the river camp humming with life, you prepare to ride again, not in rage, not in rescue, but toward the alliances that will make or break what comes next. The first crack in the friendship comes quietly, not with a clash of steel or a shouted betrayal, but in the kind of silence that hangs too long between two people who once knew each other too well. You and Jamuka sit beside the fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the taut fabric of the gear. And though your bodies are close, your minds are far apart. The silence isn't peaceful, it's weighty, filled with things left unsaid. The embers pop softly, like small warnings, while Jamuka stares into the fire with the expression of a man doing calculations rather than reminiscing. Around you, the camp breathes with life, horses pawing at the earth, men laughing over bowls of broth, but in this circle of warmth, something sacred is cooling rapidly. It isn't one moment that drives the wedge, but the accumulation of small differences. When you visit neighboring clans, it's your name the herdsmen recognize first. When disputes arise, it's your judgment that carries weight. Jamuka still speaks with the charm of a chieftain's son, all proud metaphors and long toasts, but his speeches float above the concerns of the common men. You speak more plainly. You ask what's needed. You listen. And that quiet attention, the kind your father taught you, gathers power. It spreads like a fire beneath dry grass, slow at first, but unstoppable once it takes hold. At first, Jamuka tries to dismiss it. He hosts larger feasts, adorns his gairs with fine pelts, and speaks more often of ancestry in the sacred line of Borjigin blood. You say nothing. You let him talk of noble rights and ancestral herds, while you walk the camp at night, speaking to guards, settling disputes, making plans. You don't fight for loyalty. You earn it meal by meal, decision by decision, until even the men who once looked only to him begin to glance your way when the wind shifts. And then he hosts a Kurultai without you. It's not treason, but it is a message. A gathering of nobles and tribal elders, held without your presence. And at its conclusion, Shamuka is named Khan of the Mongols by right of bone and sky. The title echoes with formality, but not with strength. You learn of it not from an envoy, but from a passing trader, and that makes it worse. There is no invitation, no explanation, only the announcement, hanging in the air like smoke from a fire you weren't allowed to see. You return to your own camp and summon your own gathering, not with gold and ceremony, but with meat, fire, and clear eyes. There is no vote, no crown. You simply tell the truth, that Jamuka has broken the bond, that he has elevated his bloodline above his oath, and that leadership earned in hardship will always be stronger than that inherited in a cradle. The men listen. Some nod, others say nothing. But in the days that follow, you notice the shift. Men tie their horses closer to your gear. Women bring you their grievances first. The loyalty is no longer shared. It's yours. For a time, there is no violence. The steppe holds its breath, as though waiting to see which name will burn first. You know what's coming. Jamuka won't ignore the insult. He was raised to believe that power is owed to him, not earned. And you know, deep in your bones, that the day he names himself Khan is the day he begins preparing for war. When his army begins to move, you're not surprised. He comes from the south, banners high, with warriors dressed in silk-trimmed armor and polished saddles. His force is larger, better supplied, more noble in birth, if not in resolve. His horses leave trails of dust that stretch for miles, and when you receive word of his approach, you don't hesitate. You gather your riders, fewer in number, rougher in gear, but fierce and loyal, and you ride out to meet him. Not to beg, not to reason, but to show him that the fire he thought he extinguished is still burning in the grass behind him. The confrontation happens near the Anan River, where the valley opens wide beneath a slate-gray sky. You arrive first, setting up camp on high ground, letting him see you clearly. There is no surprise attack, no subterfuge. Both sides know this is no mere skirmish. This is a reckoning. The battle begins with arrows. Your archers loose the first volley at dawn, their bows creaking in rhythm like a drumbeat. Jamuka's men respond quickly, their lines holding firm as they push forward in a controlled wave. The ground beneath your horses turns slick with churned mud and blood, and the morning light turns copper in the haze of dust and smoke. You ride through the center, sword drawn, shouting orders and pulling riders into new formations as Jamuka's flank presses harder. His forces are better armed, but yours are faster, more flexible, less encumbered by tradition. For hours, neither side breaks. The cries of the wounded mix with the clash of iron, the shrill whinny of terrified horses, the grunts of men fighting not for glory, but for the right to shape the future. You lose good riders, so does he. But by late afternoon, fatigue begins to fray your lines. One by one, your men fall back, not in panic, but in painful, practiced withdrawal. Jamuka's warriors press their advantage. You call the retreat, not because you've lost the will to fight, but because you see the tide turning and refuse to waste lives for pride. You return to your camp with what remains, shoulders heavy, silence draped across your men like a second cloak. You've been beaten, but not broken. Then comes the news. Jamuka has taken prisoners, 80 of your warriors, captured after the retreat. And instead of ransoming them, instead of honoring their courage or offering mercy, he gives the order. They are to be boiled alive in iron cauldrons. It's not just cruelty. It's a spectacle. A message carved in screams and steam, meant to teach the step that betrayal carries a cost. The act sends a shiver through every tribe. Even those who favored him begin to murmur. There's honor in war, but this is something else. You do not cry out for vengeance. You do not curse his name or call for heads. You simply ride through your camp that night, checking the lines, speaking softly to your men, reminding them that defeat is not the same as failure, that the stories told tomorrow will be shaped by what you do next, not what happened today. And that boiling men is not the act of a ruler. It is the act of a man already afraid of losing. By dawn, your scouts are already reporting movements, new groups riding toward your banner, men disillusioned by Jamuka's cruelty, clans uncertain of their allegiance, now tilting quietly toward you. His fire may have won the battle, but it has scorched his legacy. And as you sit beneath the early morning sky, watching the sun rise over the battered grassland, you feel the weight of the future settling on your shoulders, not as a burden, but as a challenge. Because now, the line between Anda and enemy has been drawn in blood, and you know with certainty that only one of you will cross it alive. The first time you attend a Kuriltai as more than an observer, it feels less like a council of equals and more like a battle without weapons. There are no horses galloping into formation, no arrows slicing through the air. Instead, there are words, layered, indirect, and aimed as carefully as any blade. Men sit cross-legged in circles around fires, passing bowls of mare's milk and pretending to speak plainly. But everyone there is performing. Every sip, every nod, every quiet pause is calculated. The Kuriltai is not where tribes decide who should lead. It's where they watch to see who already has. You come prepared, not with titles or robes, but with food and memory. You remember the old men's names, their horses, their dead brothers, the time your father helped them through a drought or a raid. You bring lamb, roasted slow, and spiced the way they like it. You send bowls of fatty broth to their tents before dawn, a small gesture that whispers, I know who you are, and I respect what you've endured. These things matter more than declarations. You do not speak first. That would be foolish. You listen, nodding quietly as each chief shares his concerns: lack of grazing land, rogue bands of merchants near the northern river, the Karaite trading unfairly. You let them speak until they run out of words, until the silence turns toward you. Only then do you respond, not with promises, but with questions. What would help them most? What would they need to feel secure under one banner? You speak as if the unity already exists, just waiting for a name to hang from it. And slowly, it begins to shift. Not all at once. Not in a grand sheer or a lifted sword, but in the way men look at you, in the way they lean forward when you speak, in the way no one objects when your men take the shaded places near the center of the gathering. This is the secret of the Kuriltai. It's not a vote. It's gravity. Influence gathers slowly, like water in a dry gully. One drop, then another, until the weight of it becomes impossible to ignore. Shamuka had the nobles, the well-born, the ones who could trace their bloodline back to sacred hills and ancient legends. You have the ones who till the soil, who ride without saddles, who bury their dead without stone markers, because the earth remembers better than carved rock. They don't care whose great-grandfather married which daughter of a half-legend. They care who brings them meat, who protects their herds, who remembers their names. And you do. After the council disperses, you find yourself beside an old warrior with a voice like broken wood. He fought with your father once, lost 2 fingers to frostbite in the mountains beyond the Annan River. He tells you plainly, we don't need a Khan who remembers the sky. We need one who remembers the ground. You carry that with you. Over the next moons, you call more councils. Not always formal, not always in one place. Sometimes they're held in the shadow of a hill, sometimes beside a river where horses drink, sometimes under the eaves of the forest where the birds fall quiet at dusk. You don't wait for the old structure to welcome you in. You rebuild it as you go, reshaping what a Kuriltai can be. Not an echo chamber for noble men, but a gathering place for those who've never had a voice. You begin asking for commitments in new ways. Not oaths, not long-winded speeches, but simple acts. Share one bow, send one son. Ride with us once. Just once. After that, decide for yourself. And most of them do ride. And after that, most of them stay. The camp grows, not chaotically, but with strange order. Families arrive with their whole lives in carts and on the backs of goats. Blacksmiths offer their hammers. Cooks offer salted haunches of deer. Herds are merged. Watch rotations are formed. No one says the word empire, but something close to it is beginning to stir in the corners of the map. Still, it isn't easy. Rivalries run deep. One clan nearly comes to blows with another over grazing rights. You settle it not by choosing a favorite, but by choosing neither. You move both groups equally, inconveniently, and explain that being under one banner means equal discomfort. They grumble, but they obey. Later, you visit each camp quietly, one by one, and listen to their complaints. Not because you must, but because you know no one else ever has. Bert, ever steady, watches from the margins of the gatherings. She says little, but when she speaks, it cuts through the dust and noise. She tells you which men speak truth and which simply flatter. She reminds you not to trust the quick promises. The ones who offer everything, she says, are often those who plan to give nothing. You take her advice to heart, trimming your list of allies not by strength, but by character. At the final Kuriltai of the season, one of the elder chieftains, a man with more wrinkles than teeth, stands and announces. Temujin listens before he speaks. That is why I follow him. The words are simple, but they ripple through the gathering like thunder. Men nod. Some speak quietly to each other. One by one, they step forward, not to kneel, but to place gifts at your feet. A carved saddle, a polished horn bow, a small gold amulet, cracked at the edges. Nothing grand, everything real. That night, the stars shine brighter than usual. Or maybe it only feels that way. You sit alone for a while, just beyond the light of the fire, thinking of your father, of the oath with Jamuka, of the boiling cauldrons and the blood that already coats this path. You didn't seek this, but now that it's come, you will carry it differently, not with robes, not with silver, but with a name made heavy by the weight of those who believe in it. From here, there is only one step left, but it is the biggest one. The morning of the final Kuriltai arrives with a chill in the air and the smell of dew settling into the grass. There is no trumpet, no sacred drum, no ceremonial platform waiting to elevate you. Instead, there is a clearing on the steppe and the slow stirring of hundreds of men and women who have gathered to witness something that no one will name aloud until it has already happened. The gathering begins not with shouts, but with movement, quiet, deliberate, and purposeful. Warriors polish their saddles and rewrap the grips on their bows. Older men and women adjust their robes, braid their hair with care, and speak only in short, clipped phrases. Even the children sense the gravity of the day and tread softly around the tents, their usual games subdued by the weight of anticipation. You rise at first light, as you always do, and step outside to find the world waiting. Bert is already seated, threading her belt with practiced ease, her expression composed and unreadable. She glances at you only briefly, then continues her work, knowing that anything said now would be wasted on nerves already wound tight with the tension of what lies ahead. No one in the camp speaks to you directly as you prepare, but you feel their eyes follow every movement, watching not out of reverence, but out of calculation. They want to see if you carry this moment with the same steadiness you carried a blade, if the man they followed through frost and betrayal will carry a title without being swallowed by it. By mid-morning, the clans have gathered in a wide circle near the base of a low hill, seated in rough rows around a central space, marked only by the grass flattened beneath hundreds of feet. There are no banners, no gold-threaded canopies. A ceremony is not dictated by any law. It is held together by memory, expectation, and the silent agreements passed down through generations of men who knew the power of the steppe came not from blood, but from the illusion of unity. The elders speak first, one after another, their words steady and full of the weight of age. They do not offer praise. Instead, they recount the history that brought them here, the breaking of alliances, the boiling of prisoners, the collapse of old ways, and the rise of one man from exile to dominance. Each tale adds another stone to the foundation already forming beneath your feet. When your name is spoken aloud, it is not shouted. It is offered slowly, as if the weight of it might crack the teeth of the man who says it. Tem Eugene, the old Khan of the Jurchen clan intones, who fed the hungry when we had no meat, who remembered the names of our sons, who kept his hands clean when others burned with ambition. After him, more voices follow, each one softer than the last, until silence falls over the assembly, like the closing of a gate. No one moves. You do not rise. You simply stand and walk into the center, not because someone called you, but because no one stops you. You do not wear silk. You do not carry a jeweled sword. You wear the same coat you wore when you chased the Merkits into the river valley, and your boots are still crusted with earth from the journey. You speak only once, your voice calm and steady, and you ask a single question. Will you follow me not because of who I am, but because of what we can build? The answer comes not in cheers, but in motion. One by one, men step forward and place tokens at your feet. A braid of horsehair, a stone with the name of an ancestor scratched into its surface, a rusted knife wrapped in linen. Each object represents a piece of loyalty, offered freely, without coercion, without threat. And then, when the last gift has been given, the chant begins, not from your men, not from the boldest, but from the quiet watchers, the ones who waited to be certain. Genghis Khan. The name rolls through the crowd like a rising wind, gaining force as it passes from mouth to mouth. You remain still as it surrounds you, not because you are unmoved, but because you understand that to acknowledge the moment too quickly would shatter its illusion. This is no coronation. This is a consensus born from exhaustion, hunger, survival, and fear. You are not the chosen of the sky. You are the man who would not die, who did not bend, and who remembered every face that once turned away from you. Later, when the fires have burned low and the gathering has dissolved into smaller knots of murmured conversation, you sit alone at the edge of camp. Bert finds you there, silent as always, and places a warm bowl of milk in your hands. She does not speak. She does not need to. You both know what has changed. You drink slowly, letting the weight of the title settle into your bones. It is not a crown. It is a yoke. In the days that follow, the work begins in earnest. Messengers are sent to distant tribes, some bearing your name for the first time. Others bring gifts or warnings. The camps are reorganized, supplies tallied, training sharpened. The talk of war grows louder, but it is not the first step. Before the conquest, before the siege, before your horse leaves tracks across continents, you must first turn back to the soul of the Mongols themselves. You must solidify what holds your people together, not with fear, but with something older, something woven into the bones of the steppe. Because Khans are not made only by their victories. They are shaped by the customs they honor, the rights they uphold, and the traditions that remind even the most hardened warrior of where he came from. And so, before you take your armies to the borders of the known world, you return first to the old ways. The spirit stones, the blood bonds, the codes of justice whispered by shamans under the moonlight. What comes next is not the empire. It is the foundation of the empire. The plains stretch ahead of you in an unbroken ribbon of gold and gray, the grass swaying in long, slow waves as the wind moves across it like breath. Your horse is weary. So are you. The others behind you, your scouts, your brothers, your newest followers, ride without complaint. But their faces have begun to hollow at the edges. Food ran out 3 days ago. Water yesterday. And yet you press on, because turning back would mean more than shame. It would mean letting the stories die before they've taken root. The land offers nothing. No streams, no herds, no villages. Even the birds have vanished. The sky looms overhead, pale and flat, and your mouth is too dry to curse the weather. When night falls, you set up no tents. There's no need. You rest in a circle, backs to each other, eyes half open. The stars above are sharp and merciless, their light revealing ribs under skin, cracked lips, the trembling fingers of warriors, trying to keep hold of their reins. It's not the first time you've been here, in the shadow of hunger, just one wrong step away from death. You know the signs, the slowing of thought, the way a man grows quiet, then begins to mumble, then stops responding altogether. One of your younger men begins to drift during the ride, his eyes dull, his horse wandering sideways until another rider reaches out and grabs the reins. He says nothing, but you can see in his face the understanding that something must be done. When the decision is made, no one argues. You halt the column beneath a sparse copse of trees, the only shade for miles. You dismount. Tie your horse loosely. Approach it slowly. She knows what's coming. You press your face to her neck for a moment, letting her smell you. You murmur your thanks. Then, with a swift practiced motion, you draw a small blade and make a shallow cut in the thick vein beneath her mane. She flinches, but does not bolt. The blood comes slowly, a dark, rich stream that pools in the bowl one of your men holds with shaking hands. You do not take much, only a mouthful or two. Enough to steady you, enough to remind your body that it still has work to do. You drink first because you must. Because if you hesitate, the others will refuse. The blood is warm, slightly metallic, thicker than you remember. It coats your tongue and throat, and you have to force yourself not to gag. But it stays down. and within moments, the dizziness lifts. Not completely, but enough. You pass the bowl. One by one, the others drink. No one speaks. There is no shame in it. This is an old rite, older than any border or flag. The horse gives. The man survives. The horse lives. The bond deepens. You wipe the blade clean on your sleeve and bandage the wound with a strip of your sash. She nuzzles your shoulder. You whisper to her again, promising water soon. Grass. Rest. She doesn't answer, but she stays close. That night, the air feels different. Not warmer, not softer, but filled with something like clarity. Hunger peels back the layers of pretense. You see each man around the fire, not as a warrior or servant or ally, but as what they are. Flesh clinging to determination, driven by little more than belief and stubbornness. They eat nothing, say little, but they do not falter. You think of your father, how he used to speak of blood as more than just what flowed through veins. He said it was memory, responsibility, sacrifice. That to share it was to bind yourself, not only to your kin, but to the land, to the animals, to the sky itself. You never fully understood what he meant until now. In the days that follow, you do it twice more. Different horses each time, always sparingly, always with care. Each time, the blood gives you just enough to keep moving. And each time, your men follow your lead without protest, though their eyes have begun to carry that faraway look, the kind that comes when a man lives more in instinct than thought. Eventually, you find water, a shallow stream, half muddied by hoofprints, choked with reeds and algae, but cold and running all the same. The men fall to their knees and drink directly from the bank, not bothering with bowls. You let them. When you rise again, wet-faced and newly alive, you do something unexpected. You call for a circle and you speak, not long, not loudly, but with a firmness they haven't heard since before the hunger. You remind them of where you've come from, of the nights spent clawing at frozen earth, of the time your tribe left you for dead, of the collar, of the mud. You tell them that the world will not give them survival, only the opportunity to seize it. That blood, horse blood, their own blood, the blood of their enemies, will be the price of shaping something permanent. They listen, heads bowed, not because of your words, but because they've lived them. That night, around a fire made from scrub and dry dung, you watch as one of the younger warriors cuts a sliver of meat from the haunch of a rabbit and offers it to his horse before eating the rest. Not because the horse needs it, but because it gave him something when he had nothing. No one comments on the gesture, but you know they all saw it. In time, you know the stories will grow. They'll say you rode a week through the Gobi with no food, that you lived on blood and wind, that you promised your men the sky would bend if they held their silence long enough. You don't mind the exaggerations. Truth bends to myth when survival tastes like iron and burns like duty. What matters is that they remember the moment, not the stream or the trees or even the horse, but the choice. That when everything had gone, they chose to keep going. And that when they drank blood, they swallowed not just the hunger, but the fear that they were too human to endure it. You sleep that night with your blade beside you, the fire low, the stars quiet. The horse you bled breathes slowly just behind you. She has not left your side. And as the wind shifts, carrying the scent of something distant, smoke, perhaps a rain, you think not of battles or banners, but of the rituals that bind your people more tightly than any throne. Before you rule their lands, you must first understand their survival. And so, from the mouthful of blood that kept you alive, you ride toward the rites that hold your world together. The shamans, the sky readers, the spirit stones that wait on distant hills. The road to the sky readers wends north, through hills crusted with lichen and grass that grows coarse between scattered stones. These are not fertile lands. The air is thinner, colder, touched by the kind of silence that clings to the bones. You do not come here for pasture or for plunder. You come because this is where the Tengrists dwell, the old shamans, the bone casters, the men and women who speak to the wind and claim it speaks back. You ride without escort this time. Only Bert and your youngest brother, Temujh, accompany you. There are no banners, no guards, only stillness. Because here, among these sacred hills, a Khan is not a Khan. Here, you are only a question waiting to be answered. The Tengrists do not send greeters. Their camp appears all at once, rising from the mist like an illusion. Simple gairs nestled in a crescent around a single twisted tree whose bark peels and curls like old paper. No one calls out, no dogs bark. But as you dismount and approach on foot, a man steps from the largest tent. He wears no armor, no ornaments, only a robe of tanned hide stitched with blue thread. His beard is white, his face carved by decades of wind. He does not bow. He nods once and says your name, not as a greeting, but as confirmation. Inside the tent, the air smells of ash, juniper, and old wool. Smoke curls upward through a hole in the roof, drawing your eye to the sky beyond. You sit cross-legged on a mat that crackles beneath you, and the shaman begins to speak, not to you, but into the space, as though your presence has merely allowed him to resume a conversation interrupted long ago. He speaks of the sky, not the blue dome you see overhead, but the eternal sky, the one with memory, with hunger, with judgment. Tengri, the Sky Father, watches not just your victories, he says, but your silences. He watches what you do with power when no one else is looking. He does not measure men by their lineage or their weapons, but by the weight they carry and how they choose to carry it. You listen, saying nothing. Around the fire sit other Tengrists, some old, some impossibly young. A girl with one milky eye scatters bird bones across a worn cloth. A boy no older than 10 crushes something pungent between two stones, releasing a scent that makes your nose sting. This is no performance, no ritual for show. This is the slow work of watching, listening, and interpreting the invisible. At one point, the old shaman gestures for you to stand and follow him outside. He leads you to a small rise behind the camp, where the stones form a rough spiral around a shallow pit. He says nothing as you approach, only watches as you step inside the circle and kneel. The wind shifts, tugging at your coat, lifting your hair. Then, in a voice softer than you expect, he asks, "Do you see the movement?" You don't know what he means. The sky is empty, gray, cold, wide. He waits. Then you notice it, not in the clouds or the air, but in the feeling along your skin. The way the wind changes direction every few breaths, the way the grass leans without settling, the way your heart begins to beat in time with something you cannot name. That is the sky deciding, he says. You don't pretend to understand, but you do not forget it. Back in the tent, the shamans prepare a reading, not for fortune, but for pattern. They burn dried roots, scatter earth from 5 distant rivers, and draw lines with a bone knife along a slab of wood that has blackened over years of smoke and ritual. When it is done, the elder looks at you with eyes that feel too ancient to belong to one man. You may unite the tribes, he says, but if you forget who you were when you had nothing, the sky will turn from you. He does not smile. He does not bless you. He only returns to his fire, and you understand that the audience is over. That night, Bert asks what you saw in the sky. You shake your head. It wasn't the sky I saw, you say. It was the part of me I don't usually listen to. She nods once and says no more. In the days that follow, the lessons linger. You begin to notice the wind again, not just its direction, but its rhythm. You watch the birds, not for omens, but for insight. You begin rising earlier, speaking less and listening more. When your men gather, they sense the change, though they cannot name it. You have become quieter, not gentler, but steadier, as if your thoughts now travel deeper before surfacing. Word begins to spread that the Khan walks with the wind at his back, that he speaks less because the sky has already said what must be done. You do not encourage the stories, but you do not stop them. The Tengrists send no formal message after you leave, but a month later, a carved staff arrives at your camp, wrapped in felt. No words, no symbols, just the smooth, spiraled wood. You understand it as a gesture of alignment, not allegiance, but recognition. You place it in your gear, near the center, and do not allow anyone to touch it. When the next storm comes, your men wait to see if you will cancel the ride. You do not. You move through the rain as though it were nothing, because the sky is not to be feared. It is to be read, to be followed. And now, you carry its weight not as a burden, but as proof that something beyond lineage or conquest is guiding you forward. Before you build your laws and march east into uncertain lands, you must complete the rituals that bind you to your people, not just through fire and battle, but through the quiet oaths of blood and breath, stone and sky. And so, from the teachings of the Tengrists, you now ride toward the oldest bond of all, one sealed not in words or ceremony, but in the mixing of blood beneath the open air. The camp lies quiet under a pale sky, the kind of sky that promises neither storm nor warmth, just wind and a long horizon. You've returned from the mountains carrying more than the scent of smoke and the sound of bone dice rattling on cloth. What stays with you is the way the Tengrists moved, how they never rushed, never stumbled, how every act had weight behind it, even when no one was watching. That stillness clings to you now, and your men feel it. They speak less around the fires. They sit straighter, more alert, not from fear, but from something unspoken they now sense curling around your name. But leadership cannot rest on mystery alone. It must be bound to something stronger than myth. In a world where tribes shift like grass and loyalty rides on the back of hunger, words are too easily washed away. What lasts are the pacts written in blood, not written with quills or carved into stone, but sliced into flesh, visible and living. You call for an oath, not one sworn in council, but in private, between men who will hold your life in their hands and expect you to do the same. There will be no feast, no drums, just a bowl, a knife, and the night sky. You choose carefully. These are not merely your closest riders, nor the loudest supporters. These are men who have lost what you've lost, men who have ridden hungry, bled for your camp, and asked for nothing but a place to stand. Some are from noble families, now scattered to the wind. Others are herdsmen who speak more to horses than to people. But each one has stood with you in silence when it mattered. You gather in a clearing just beyond the edge of camp. The air is still, and the fire is small, barely enough to light your faces. There are 9 of you. You do not speak until all are seated. Before you is a bowl made from hammered bronze, passed down from your grandfather. It is scratched, tarnished, and dented from long use, and that is what makes it worthy. This bowl has never held wine. It has never served guests. It holds only what must not be forgotten. Each man, in turn, slices the palm of his hand with a short curved blade. The blade is cleaned between each cut, passed with quiet reverence. No one winces. The blood drips into the bowl, 10 slow offerings that swirl and darken in the flickering firelight. When it is your turn, you draw the blade slowly, not for drama, but for care. You know this cut will ache for days, that it may scar. That is the point. You press your hand against the others, each man meeting you palm to palm, one after the next, until the bowl is full, and your hands are slick with something heavier than water. It is not ceremony for its own sake. It is memory in motion. A reminder that everything after this will be shared: glory, loss, betrayal, death. One of the younger men, Baruchel, speaks when it is done. His voice is soft, hesitant. He asks not what you will promise them, but what you will do if the world turns against you again. You do not give him poetry. You answer plainly. If the world turns, you turn with it. If your men fall, you carry their names. If your blood dries in the dust, then at least it dries beside theirs. He nods, and the question is never asked again. The knife is buried that night, just beneath the fire, not hidden, not marked. Its purpose is fulfilled. No one will use it again. In the days that follow, there are no speeches, but the bond has weight. When disputes arise between clans in your camp, the men who took the oath speak first, and others listen. When supplies are short, it is those same men who eat last. Their cuts heal slowly, scabbing over into pale reminders just beneath the calluses of their sword hands. You learn something watching them move through the camp. It is not your name that commands attention. It is theirs. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They only carry the knowledge that your survival and theirs are now the same. That is enough. News of the oath spreads, of course. It always does. You never announce it, but word drifts beyond your tents. Other clans begin asking questions, wondering why your followers now wear the same knotted red cord around their wrists, or why they seem to move as if answering an unseen signal. Some mock it, others grow nervous, because they understand the truth. A blood bond like that cannot be bought or undone. It does not fade when the wind changes. Later that month, a messenger from a distant tribe arrives with a strange request. He has been sent by a young warrior who has heard the stories, who asks if he might swear the same oath, even if he cannot join you yet. You do not respond immediately. You hold the message in your hand and stare at it long into the night, wondering just how far your shadow now stretches. You begin to understand what the shamans meant. That leadership is not about being followed, but about being carried. In words, in stories, in scars. The oath you made in the clearing is no longer yours alone. It is now a thing that travels on other men's breath. And though the blade is buried, the memory of it lingers, sharp and unyielding. As your camp continues to grow and more riders tie the red cord around their wrists, you feel the step tilting again. Not violently, just a slow shift, the way ice creaks before it breaks. Before you ask your men to ride into unknown lands, to cross rivers and bury their dead on foreign soil, there is one more bond to acknowledge, one even older than blood. The sky may guide you, and the oath may bind you, but the earth remembers the stones. The hills rise gently in the distance, worn smooth by centuries of wind and hoofbeats, their slopes covered in low grass and scattered stones bleached white by sun and time. You ride slowly, not because the terrain is difficult, but because it feels wrong to approach the oval at speed. This is not a place for haste. The sky above is wide and pale, the kind of sky that seems to listen more than watch. The horses grow quieter the closer you come. Even your men, hardened by battle and long travel, begin to sit straighter in their saddles, their voices trailing into silence. The ovu itself stands just ahead, a mound of rocks, piled high and ringed with old prayer scarves faded by wind and dust. Blue cloth flutters at the top, tied to a single branch that juts up like a crooked finger. At first glance, it looks unimpressive, just a pile of stone and scrap perched on a ridge. But this is not a monument. It's a memory, a marker not of conquest or death, but of movement, built and rebuilt by those who passed before you, each traveler adding a stone, a whisper, a hope. You dismount, the others follow. No one is told to be quiet, but they are. There are no priests here, no scripts or rules, only tradition. You've been here once before, long ago, as a boy clutching your mother's hand, watching her walk around the pile 3 times while whispering something into the wind. You didn't understand it then. You barely understand it now, but you feel it. The way the air presses closer to the skin, the way your thoughts grow louder in your own head. Each man picks up a stone. There are no special ones, no particular sizes. Only rocks, chosen from the earth. You run your fingers over a flat piece of slate, still warm from the sun, and hold it a moment before stepping forward. One by one, you circle the ovu 3 times, moving clockwise, each step measured. You do not speak. You only breathe, and with each step, you remember. You remember your father, dying far from home, poisoned at a feast meant to bind. You remember the yoke around your neck, the weight of humiliation, the blood of your brother. You remember the sound of Bert's voice when you found her again, and the quiet of the campfire, the night Jamuka named himself Khan. Each memory threads itself into your footsteps until they feel heavy with everything you've carried and everything you still must. At the end of the 3rd circle, you place your stone. Some whisper prayers. Others say names. You say nothing. The stone is enough. Temujin, your youngest brother, hesitates before he walks. He has grown taller, more capable, but his eyes still search yours for direction. You nod, and he moves forward, gripping a jagged piece of quartz with both hands, as if afraid it might vanish. Bert watches from a distance, arms folded, her expression unreadable. She does not add a stone, not this time. Her stones are elsewhere, in her actions, her choices, the way she shaped her people while standing half a step behind you. After everyone has walked the circle and made their offering, you remain. The wind picks up slightly, fluttering the scarves overhead. The air smells of dry earth and distant pine. You kneel, not out of reverence, but instinct. You press your hand to the mound, feeling the heat stored in the stones, and let your thoughts quiet. The ovo is not for asking. It is for remembering. You don't beg the spirits for favor. You simply remind them that you are still here. In the old stories, the spirit stones speak only to those who've lost everything. They say that if the wind shifts while you circle the ovo, it means the ancestors have noticed. If a hawk passes overhead, it is an answer. Today, the wind remains steady. The sky remains clear. No hawks appear. But you feel seen nonetheless. When you rise, one of your men steps forward, unasked. He removes a strip of blue silk from his sleeve, a keepsake from his mother, you think, and ties it to the highest branch of the ovo. The cloth catches the wind instantly, snapping once before settling into a soft ripple. Others follow. Soon the mound bristles with new offerings, bits of leather, twisted cords, a small carved horn, even a tooth wrapped in yarn. You say nothing as they leave their pieces. It is not a performance. It is not grief. It is memory, willingly shared. Later, as the sun begins to sink behind the hills, the group gathers near the ridge to rest. You sit apart, watching the sky begin to change. A fire crackles low. One of the older warriors, Barokol, ever quiet, sits beside you and murmurs something about the ground being heavier here. You know what he means? This place feels full, as if thousands of footsteps still echo just beneath the soil. The weight is not burden. It is presence. That night, you sleep close to the ovu. There is no tent, no guard rotation, only the stones and the wind. In your dreams, you walk again around the mound, but this time you're alone. And every stone you pass holds a name, names of those who have followed you, those who have bled for you, and those you have yet to meet. You wake before dawn, the stars still visible overhead, and the wind finally shifts, brushing your face like a whispered warning. You mount your horse without speaking. The others follow, the camp packed swiftly and without ceremony. You ride away from the ovu, not with joy or solemnity, but with a quiet steadiness. The kind that comes after a ritual has reminded you why you do not turn back. In time, the spirit stones will fade behind you, buried by new hills and new fires. But their weight will remain in your thoughts, grounding you when voices grow loud and tempers flare. Long before you wear silk, before your name is etched into foreign languages, you will still feel this ridge beneath your feet. You will still taste dust and iron, and you will still remember that the sky watches from above, but the earth carries the names. Your path from here does not return to stillness. It leads back toward judgment. The next rite is not whispered to the stones or shared around a fire. It is a trial of proof, of courage, of belief. It is justice by ordeal. The arrow bones are older than most of the men gathered around them, smooth with handling and blackened, on one end by fire that was lit before your rise began. They sit in a shallow wooden bowl carved from larch, resting on a mat of woven grass. No one speaks as the bowl is placed down. No one needs to. The shape of this ritual is already known, carried in stories in memory and whispered warnings from mother to child. You sit at the edge of the circle, legs crossed, arms resting on your knees, and feel the air growing heavier with each passing minute, as though the sky itself has paused to watch. The dispute that has brought you here is not rare, but it is sharp. A horse stolen, a witness uncertain. One man claims the animal wandered. The other swears it was taken in the night, rope cut clean. Both are trusted. Both are wronged. You cannot simply decide. That would invite whispers of favoritism, of weakness. But a blood feud cannot be allowed to bloom. You have been shaping something larger than yourself. A federation, a law, a future. If it rots now, it will rot from the inside, slowly and without sound. And so, you return to something older than doubt. The ordeal is chosen freely, but once chosen, it binds. 2 arrow bones are placed into the bowl, one clean, the other scorched at its tip. The man who draws the blackened bone must pass a trial. 3 days alone in the wilderness, unarmed, without food, water, or horse. If he returns, Tengri has cleared his name. If not, his silence becomes a verdict. There is no appeal, no second chance. You offer each man one last opportunity to speak, but they both shake their heads. They kneel before the bowl and draw. The one who pulls the marked bone is a man named Shaddai. He stares at it for a long moment, not with fear, but with resignation. Then he rises. He removes his outer robe, ties his belt tighter, and accepts a single rawhide strap from one of the elders, a token allowed by tradition, though it will do little against the cold or hunger. Without ceremony, he walks away from the camp and into the open plain, his shadow stretching out behind him like a path. The first night passes slowly. Your camp does not sleep well. Fires burn lower than usual. Voices murmur but do not rise. You hear the men asking quiet questions they would never dare say to you directly. Will he return? Did he lie? Will Tengri spare him? You say nothing. You do not leave your tent. You wait, just as they do. On the second day, you ride to the edge of a ridge alone and watch the horizon. The wind is constant, tugging at your sleeves, stirring the dust into low spirals. There are no birds, no sign of life, just a sky that watches without blinking. You think about the man walking out there, without water, without blade, carrying nothing but the weight of his own truth. It is not the elements that decide these trials, not truly. It is what rises inside a man when no one else is there to carry it for him. The third day dawns gray and sharp-edged. You return to the same ridge, earlier this time, before the others stir. The plains lie flat and quiet. A pair of black dots appears in the distance just before dusk, and for a moment, you think it must be nothing, stones, perhaps, or carrion birds. But the dots move, slowly, then more steadily. It is him. Jedi walks with his head lowered, shoulders bowed beneath fatigue. His clothes are torn, and his hands are scraped and blistered, but his steps are even. He carries something wrapped in cloth, tied to his belt. When he reaches the camp, he does not speak. He kneels, removes the arrow bone from his pouch, and places it back in the bowl without looking up. The circle around him parts in silence. You walk to him and help him to his feet. You ask nothing. He says nothing. You simply place a hand on his shoulder and nod. That is enough. The other man, the accuser, does not object. He steps forward and offers his belt cord to Jedi, not as a trophy, but as an apology. It is accepted. The matter is over. That night, your camp is quiet in a different way. Not fearful, not restless, but solemn. Something ancient has passed through your people, like a wind that leaves everything slightly changed. You sit alone with the arrow bones and feel their weight in your palm. They are light, but they carry more than bones should. You return them to the bowl and cover it with a piece of dyed felt. The memory of the trial will last, not because it was dramatic or brutal, but because it was real. Because the law must cost something, or else it means nothing. Your people are beginning to understand that law is not about punishment. It is about certainty. Not the certainty of guilt, but the certainty that justice will not be avoided, not bent for convenience. In time, your name will be tied to decrees and scrolls, to laws written in dozens of tongues and enforced across thousands of miles. But those laws will not begin in palaces. They will begin here in the dust, in silence, beside a bowl of carved bones. Tomorrow, you will speak of order. You will name new codes and summon elders to begin shaping something permanent. But before that happens, you sleep with the window of your tent open, letting the wind blow across your face, carrying with it the scent of dust, firewood, and sweat. The same scent you remember from your youth, from exile, from days when your only justice was survival. You sleep lightly, knowing that in the morning, you will no longer be just a leader of men. You will be a maker of rules. The morning of the feast arrives without a cloud in the sky, the blue stretching wide and pale above your camp, as if even the heavens have chosen stillness for what is to come. All around, the camp awakens with movement that feels less like chaos and more like preparation. Fires are lit with care rather than urgency. Horses are groomed with fresh handfuls of dry grass. Women step between gears carrying bundles of cloth and sacks of millet, their eyes focused, their feet steady. It is not a day for battle, nor for counsel, but for something more delicate, the management of power through ritual, hospitality, and spectacle. You rise before the first guest arrives, stepping outside your tent to breathe in the cold morning air, sharp with smoke and trampled grass. The preparations stretch in all directions. Banners hang from tall wooden frames, painted with symbols of your alliances, lions, wolves, eagles, fluttering in the gentle wind. Rows of rugs have been rolled out for honored guests to sit upon, their woven threads dulled from use, but still bright in the corners. Pot-bellied cauldrons hang over steady flames, already bubbling with goat meat and onions, and the unmistakable scent of boiling marrow fills the air. There is a quiet tension behind all of it, but not of fear. This is the kind of silence that waits for ceremony to begin, when every movement is done with the awareness that others are watching. The first of your allies arrives before noon. His robes are dark, stiff with embroidery, and he carries a narrow-faced boy at his side, perhaps a nephew, or hostage, or both. More guests follow soon after, all bearing the same kinds of gifts: boughs wrapped in hide, clusters of eagle feathers, sacks of fermented mare's milk sealed with resin. You accept them all with grace, knowing that what is given is less important than who gives it. The gifts are currency, but the exchange is political, measured not in weight or value, but in what is left unspoken after the object changes hands. At the heart of the camp, the main gear has been prepared not for sleep, but for visibility. Its doorway faces east, the rugs inside arranged in concentric layers, so that no guest can sit without being aware of who sits closer to the center. You and Bert take your place at the innermost cushion, slightly elevated, not to show arrogance, but to allow your voice to carry. Each seating choice has already been decided days earlier, not by rank alone, but by temperament, by what you hope to inspire or avoid. You do not seat men who despise one another within easy reach. You do not allow the proudest chieftains to sit in silence at the edges. Everyone must be seen. Everyone must be heard. The fermented milk arrives in leather bags, sloshing with that familiar sour scent, and is poured into wide bowls that shine faintly in the lamplight. You lift the first one and drink. It is thick, tart, and warm from being left near the hearth overnight. It clings to your tongue, leaving a dry finish that reminds you of your childhood. The taste of scarcity turned into tradition. When you pass the bowl, it begins its slow circle around the inner ring. Each man drinks without hesitation, knowing that to refuse would be an insult not just to you, but to every host who has ever poured milk for a guest. Once the ritual is complete, the food arrives. Dishes of roasted lamb, boiled bone stew, and charred fat glisten on wooden platters. Bread made from millet flour is torn apart and dipped directly into steaming bowls. No one speaks at first. The act of eating, like the drinking of milk, is ceremonial, layered with meaning that needs no interpretation. The smell of cumin and ash lingers beneath the canvas ceiling, mingling with sweat and the rustle of silk sleeves. There is laughter, but it comes slowly, swelling only after the hunger begins to dull. A few men trade stories. One recounts a hunt where he broke his ribs falling from a ledge, but managed to kill the deer anyway. Another brags about riding 5 days without water, only to find his enemy already dead of thirst. Yet beneath the noise, there is calculation. You listen more than you speak, observing which men lean forward and which lean back, who glances often toward you, and who avoids your gaze entirely. Some use their cups to distract themselves, swirling milk with calloused fingers. Others pick at the meat with unnecessary delicacy, revealing more about their discomfort than their manners. Bert catches your eye from time to time. Her presence is steady, her posture straight but relaxed. She does not interrupt, but when she does speak, her words land with intention. The women listen to her. So do the men, even if they pretend not to. As the meal continues, music begins. An elder with a 2-stringed fiddle plays softly, the notes quivering like wind over grass. No lyrics, just a melody that speaks of distance and silence, and the kind of loneliness only the steppe can produce. It casts a strange calm over the room. Conversation falters, then falls quiet until only the music remains. You let it play for longer than necessary, choosing stillness over any declaration. When it ends, you stand. You do not speak of titles or edicts. You do not proclaim plans. You only raise your cup once more and hold it high until the others do the same. You drink, place the bowl beside you, and nod. That is enough. The message is received. The Khan does not need to raise his voice to be heard. Once the guests begin to leave, the room empties in concentric rings. Those closest to you linger longest, hoping for a word, a gesture, something to anchor them a little nearer to your circle. You grant it in small ways, a hand on the shoulder, a smile not given to others. Nothing dramatic, just enough to maintain gravity. By nightfall, the camp quiets again. The rugs have been shaken out and rolled, the bowls rinsed and stacked. You sit alone with Bert beneath the stars, both of you sharing a small dish of fermented curd, still cool from its stone bowl. She asks you what you saw, and you answer without thinking, the shape of what will become. This feast, like the trials and rituals before it, was more than ceremony. It was architecture. It drew the invisible lines that will hold your court together as it moves across mountains and deserts, carried not on wheels, but in memory and expectation. From here, the yurt becomes a throne room, the gesture becomes decree, and the language of survival becomes the language of law. You do not build your court with stone. There are no columns, no marble floors to echo your footsteps, no carvings to impress foreign emissaries with their weight or permanence. What you build moves. It folds and unfolds like the tents that shade your people, and like them, it is built for wind. Your court does not claim the earth beneath it. It travels with you, shaped not by geography, but by will. Its strength lies in its absence of roots. Wherever your yurt is raised, that is where judgments are made, laws are heard, and power speaks softly but decisively. There is no fixed boundary, but there is always a center. It is not a palace that marks your authority, but a circle of people, scribes who write on scrolls with brushes soaked in soot and water, judges who were once herders, but now hold in their memory every rule you've whispered into law, generals who speak little, but carry the code of your authority in every glance. Each day, they gather in the central tent, seated not by birth, but by usefulness. The walls are felt, the rugs coarse with dust, but the decisions made within them reshape entire nations. This is not a weakness. It is your design. When your court rides, it rides in pieces. No one man carries it all. The records are stored in saddlebags, wrapped in leather, and kept dry with oilskin. The court officials follow behind the warriors, not at the front, but close enough to be protected, far enough to not be caught in blood. They sleep where you sleep. They rise when you rise. They do not build cities. They carry governance like others carry water, as a necessity of movement. From the outside, the system looks like improvisation. From within, it is tighter than any imperial court bound to one capital. Messages pass through knots of riders with such speed that your word can reach the edge of the empire before the sun rises twice. Disputes are resolved on the trail. Taxation is recorded in marks on birch bark and confirmed with counters tied in knotted string. The court sits not on thrones, but on mats, over grass or sand or snow, wherever the horses can pause. The place does not matter. The presence does. This mobility is more than efficiency. It is ideology. It mirrors the spirit of the steppes themselves, untamed, vast, and unwilling to be claimed. Just as your people do not fence the land, you do not fence power. You lend it, temporarily, through trust and reputation, but always with the understanding that it can be revoked the same way a rider recalls a hawk with a whistle. You grant titles that do not bind men to palaces, but to movement. Ambassadors travel by horseback. Judges ride with no fixed destination, only a schedule dictated by orbit. Each summer, they return to you, bringing news, tribute, and the scent of faraway smoke. Inside your tent, decisions are made quickly. Each day begins with a gathering at dawn. No courtiers in silks or endless genuflection, just men and women who speak their minds, who know that wasting time is a kind of disrespect. You listen, you nod, you do not shout, you rarely need to. Orders are relayed before breakfast is cleared. By midday, riders are already on the road again, carrying your ruling east, west, and into valleys whose names you'll never bother to remember. Even your enemies begin to notice. Merchants traveling from distant cities expect courts to be still, like monuments. They are surprised when they find yours waiting for them after a day's ride, set up on a hillside with a view of the river. Your officials already writing, already listening. They offer gifts awkwardly, uncertain how to bow without a throne to bow before. They begin to understand that your court may look simple, but it is sharper than theirs, less show, more reach. It lives not in architecture, but in loyalty and repetition. It does not impress with its scale, but with its certainty. The strength of your court is its memory. There are no archives made of stone, but there are scribes who have followed you since your early campaigns, men who can recite verdicts from 5 winters ago, who carry the history of your rule, not in volumes, but in voice and muscle. They write in multiple scripts, Uyghur, Chinese, Arabic, each chosen to speak clearly to different parts of your empire. They know what each word means when translated across cultures, how tone can command or reassure, depending on the ink and the hand. They are not bureaucrats, they are navigators. What surprises many is the inclusion of women. Some of your judges are female. They are not there by concession, but by necessity. They see what others overlook. Their insight is neither softer nor more intuitive. It is shaped by different pressures, informed by a life of watching power without being allowed to wield it directly. Now that they do, their rulings are as precise as the edge of a well-honed blade. You give them space, not because you are generous, but because you are wise enough to know that exclusion weakens foundations. When the court moves again, there is no ceremony. The scrolls are rolled, the rugs are folded, the horses are fed, and by first light, the ground is empty. No stones remain to say you were there. No statues. No plaques. Just a faint impression in the grass. A few flattened patches where the tents once stood. But word of what happened, they will travel further than any monument. The law, once spoken, becomes a ripple. It travels with hooves, with breath, with memory. It arrives before you do. It prepares the ground. This is your version of permanence. Not the kind that resists the wind, but the kind that moves with it and cannot be caught. Your court becomes legend, not because it stands tall, but because it is always in motion. One day here, the next beyond the river, always present, but never tied to a place that might limit it. In time, others will try to replicate this. They will attempt to mimic your scrolls, your judges, your pace. But they will fail, because they misunderstand the foundation. It is not the structure that makes it work. It is the mindset. A court that survives must not outlive its people. It must live as they live. And your people are wind. There's a kind of quiet that settles inside a yurt, different from the hush of stone palaces or echoing temples. It's the hush of felt walls that absorb every voice, of layered carpets that soften each step, and of 1,000 customs that dictate how long one should speak, where one may sit, and how deeply one may bow. In this court that travels with you, wrapped in wool and bound by horse sinew, etiquette is neither formality nor ornament. It is survival. Without walls to impress, it's behavior that defines hierarchy. Without gilded halls to intimidate, it's silence, posture, and ritual that maintain authority. To enter your tent, even for your most loyal generals, is not done casually. There is a pause at the threshold, where eyes drop and breath slows. No weapons are allowed beyond the flap, not even daggers hidden in moots. A rule enforced so consistently that no man tests it twice. The interior of your yurt is dim but warm, lit by a central hearth and the filtered daylight that slips through a narrow smoke hole above. Every object has meaning. The felt rugs beneath your feet are arranged by origin, the coarser ones from the western provinces, the softer, finer weavings gifted by eastern emissaries. The cushions are placed in deliberate arcs, the closest reserved for those whose counsel you truly value. A guest who oversteps their position, even by an arm's length, will find themselves corrected not with anger, but with quiet omission from all future gatherings. Hospitality is sacred, but it is not limitless. When a guest is invited to sit, they are offered salted milk or fermented maize milk, depending on the season. This is not merely refreshment, it is a signal that they are under your protection. But the refusal to drink, or the act of setting down the bowl before finishing, is not simply rude, it is dangerous. Such gestures are read like words, and your court reads fluently. Every nod, every blink, every sip is weighed. Your officials don't just listen to what is said, they monitor what is left unsaid. They notice when a guest lingers too long on a servant's movement, or when a praise is offered one breath too late. You've always understood the power of those small rituals. They do more than keep peace. They maintain the invisible threads that stretch across your empire. From the silk traders of Samarkand to the herders in the Altai, behavior travels faster than decrees. A man may never see your face, But he will know how your court behaves. He will know that to show one's feet while seated is a grave insult, that to interrupt a judge mid-sentence is a mark of reckless arrogance, and that silence, held long enough, often speaks louder than protest. Within your inner circle, etiquette is even more precise. Bert's presence at your side is not ceremonial. It anchors the order of the court. When she speaks, her words carry a weight equal to yours, but she uses them sparingly. Her silence is strategic, not passive. Visitors often misunderstand her stillness, assuming she is merely observing, when in truth, she is shaping the room by what she chooses to ignore. She offers no correction when the courtiers whisper, but their whispers always stop when she lifts her cup. The silk walls of your tent, dyed in soft ochres and painted with swirling motifs of clouds and fire, contain these dynamics as surely as any palace chamber. They echo with no voices, making even disagreement feel private. This encourages honesty, but only from those practiced in discretion. When a man raises his voice, it is not dramatic. It is alarming. The air inside a yurt turns heavier with each syllable spoken above the usual tone, and everyone feels it. Most learn quickly that disagreement must be wrapped in flattery or clothed in metaphor. A blunt objection is not respected. It is considered clumsy. Even punishment, when it comes, follows its own choreography. You do not thunder or strike. You do not throw men from your court in public spectacle. Instead, you let the silence gather around them. You ask no further questions. You summon no further messengers. When they rise to leave, no one stops them. And once they've gone, they are not spoken of again. Their names are removed from scrolls, slowly, without ceremony. In your court, being forgotten is a more potent fate than being condemned. And yet, your etiquette is not rigid. It bends where needed. You've made exceptions for visiting lords unfamiliar with your ways, correcting them gently through your translators. You allow certain emissaries to wear their swords, if disarming them would dishonor their mission. You adapt your posture to match those from cultures that bow or kneel, or avert their gaze entirely. But your people, your commanders, your judges, your household, observe the core behaviors without fail. This is how your authority travels, not by decree, but by habit, by repetition, by the slow and constant practice of order in spaces too impermanent for marble. It is in these soft gestures that your court becomes strongest. A bow too shallow can mark the beginning of a rebellion. A mispronounced title can signal disrespect deeper than any insult. And every servant, every guard at the edge of the camp knows what to watch for. They carry no scrolls, but they carry memory. They watch as a newcomer shifts his cushion forward half an inch. They report it later, not as gossip, but as data. When outsiders witness your court, they often fail to understand the depth beneath the quiet. They see no crowns, no kneeling masses, no golden thrones. They assume the Mongols rule with speed and violence alone. But that illusion suits you. It keeps them from noticing the choreography of your court, the subtle positioning of bowls, the careful use of titles, the precise moment when a servant brings in a bowl of broth to mark the end of a conversation. What you've built is more than a mobile court. It is a performance of power written not in stone, but in behavior. It travels across steppe and desert, through gorges and valleys, always recognizable not by its form, but by its manners. And just as the walls of your yurt fold each time the camp moves, the rituals of your court fold with them neatly, precisely, without losing a single thread. The scent of broth and rendered fat always reaches you before the flap of Bert's yurt becomes visible through the maze of carts and canvas. Her tent, larger than most, but still modest by the standards of royalty elsewhere, sits just slightly apart from yours, yet never far enough to signal distance. In the court of the Mongols, the queen's yurt is not a decorative retreat lined in silk and mirrors. It is a command post, equal parts sanctuary, administration center, and ceremonial kitchen. It is also the only place in the camp where people lower their voices not out of fear, but out of respect. Bert does not rule in your shadow. She governs alongside you, her authority derived not just from marriage, but from survival, alliance, and the slow, visible accumulation of trust over decades. Her yurt is where emissaries' wives are received, where clan disputes too delicate for the main court are quietly mediated, and where the household's internal decisions, who eats, who rides, who is gifted a second chance, are weighed and resolved. The central hearth is always lit, a low, steady flame. It speaks of continuity, not spectacle. Just beyond the entrance, past layers of felt and hangings, embroidered with cloud and river motifs, lie the copper cauldrons and narrow jars of spice, brought in from distant cities, salted plums, crushed garlic, preserved onions, and pungent powders whose names only Bert and her cooks remember. The Queen's kitchen does not merely prepare meals, it prepares moods. There are broths meant to soothe warriors after bloodshed, strong fermented soups served only after childbirth, and small cakes filled with poppy and honey, brought out when diplomacy becomes fragile. Bert decides when each is used. She does not leave it to cooks. Her intuition is not of herbs or heat alone. It is political. The women who serve in her yurt are not simply attendants. Many are daughters of important allies or widows of fallen warriors, given roles of both dignity and closeness. They move with the practiced quiet of those who know they are being watched at all times. Bert does not bark orders. She hums when she's thinking, a tune no one else quite knows, and the women around her adjust their pace according to the rhythm. When she is silent for too long, they know to prepare for unexpected guests. Inside her yurt, every item has two meanings. The ceremonial kettle with its long spout is both a practical tool and a signal of alliance, gifted by a Tangut ruler during an early peace offering. The wooden ladle carved with the shape of a horse's head was made by your eldest son as a boy. It has no function anymore. It leaks slightly at the handle, but it remains beside the hearth, untouched, symbolic. These details are not decorative. They are woven into the fabric of diplomacy, memory, and command. Men do not raise their voices inside Bert's yurt. Even the most hardened generals adopt a different posture when summoned to speak with her. They sit straighter. They choose their words carefully. There are no false shows of deference. Bert would not respect that, but there is awareness. They know that she remembers names, grudges, betrayals, and kindnesses with equal precision. A man who mistreated his servants 3 winters ago may find his name left off a critical hunting expedition. Another who once gave his own cloak to a freezing messenger might receive unexpected favor. Bert's reach is long, and it is quiet. The meals that leave her yurt to feed your court are carefully planned. Even the sequence of dishes carries meaning. A bitter broth first, to cleanse the mouth and hint at caution. A richer stew afterward, thick with fat and slow-boiled bones, signaling that the discussion may now turn serious. Sweet milk candies at the end, never the beginning, and only served if harmony has been achieved. Bert uses food the way a general uses terrain, testing, coaxing, surrounding her opponents until they surrender without ever knowing they've been outmaneuvered. At the rear of the yurt, hidden behind a simple felt curtain, is her private space. Here is where she sleeps, reads letters, and keeps a collection of wooden boxes filled with gifts from distant courts. Inside them are objects of no great monetary value. A pair of silver earrings shaped like birds, a silk ribbon frayed from years of being worn, a carved stone that resembles a kneeling horse. These are her ledger of memories. She opens them not to admire, but to remember decisions, people, promises. Your children come here often, more so than they visit your tent. They're more at ease in Bert's yurt, where the rules are stricter, but the warmth more visible. Even your adult sons step softly here, instinctively bowing their heads when entering, even though they're generals in their own right. Bert expects it, and they offer it not from fear, but out of a deep, structured respect that no one has ever had to teach them aloud. Foreign envoys, when granted permission, are brought to this yurt not to dine, but to observe. Urt hosts them with measured kindness, offering dishes that reflect the breadth of your empire. Soups flavored with spices from the south, flatbreads from the western provinces, and preserved fruits from the eastern markets. Every item they're served is a message. Every silence in conversation, a cue. She doesn't ask what they want. She already knows. She allows them to speak until they overreach, then reels them gently back with a question about their homeland that leaves them unsettled by her knowledge. More than one emissary has left her yurt thinking they'd secured a victory, only to realize days later they'd agreed to more than they intended. But this is what the Queen's yurt is designed to do. It holds power in the same way it holds heat, tightly and deliberately, letting nothing escape without intention. It is the quiet center of your moving world, a place where decisions begin before they're spoken, and alliances are sealed not with handshakes, but with bowls of soup and deliberate silences. And from this kitchen, this hearth, this felt-walled chamber of strategy and smoke, the next great transformation of your rule begins to simmer. For soon, the structure you've carried across mountains and deserts will need more than mobility. It will need permanence in the minds of your people, not just as law, but as legend. The nights after council meetings are never truly quiet. Not when the fire still burns high in the center of the great tent, and not when the bowls are full and the cups never empty. These evenings are for the Khan's banquets, gatherings of roasted meat, fermented milk, and long performances that stretch until the fire turns to embers and the stars overhead begin their slow shift toward morning. At these feasts, diplomacy wears the mask of celebration. Laughter rises from deep in the chest. Songs echo from throat singers crouched near the hearth, and the air grows thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and simmering broth. But beneath the noise, something quieter simmers. The careful dance of politics played out in glances, silences, and the distance between cushions. Your court does not feast with extravagance for vanity's sake. These banquets are tools. Every bowl shared, every song commissioned, every seat offered is a message wrapped in meat and music. To be invited at all is a show of favor. To be seated near the center is a promise. And to be left out entirely, well, that's the kind of silence that carries all the way back to a man's tribe. Tonight, the throat singers have been summoned from the northern hills. Their voices don't sing in the usual sense. They rumble, hum, split into layers that seem to come from wind, stone, and river all at once. The first note always silences the room. It's not beautiful in the way other music might be. It's stranger than that, deeper. The kind of sound that reminds even the oldest men in the court of storms from their childhood. Some of your guests glance sideways at the sound, others close their eyes. The songs don't need words. They carry memory without them. But as the music continues, as the meat is carved and passed down low tables, slick with oil, the true business of the banquet begins, not in the open, but in the corners. Whispers begin near the entryway, where junior officers share news they think their commanders haven't heard. Further down the rug-lined corridor of the tent, merchants tilt their heads toward one another, trading updates on tribute routes and shortages of salt. And at the far edge, where the candles burn lower and the guards do not stand as close, plots are often born in the form of jokes, hypotheticals, or quiet complaints shared over the rim of a warm drink. These murmurs don't escape your notice. They never have. You don't need to eavesdrop. You've seated your people carefully. You know which commanders are loyal to your banner, and which still measure your strength by the width of your shadow. You know which distant cousins resent being passed over, and which allies grow too comfortable in their influence. You've placed them all in a room together, and now you watch. You watch how often one man refills another's cup. You watch how many words pass between rivals, and how many don't. You watch who laughs first at a story, and who waits until the punchline is already cold. Bert watches too, but from a different place. She does not join you in the center tonight. Instead, she sits near the outer circle with her attendants, watching the wives and daughters of your allies, listening to their tones more than their words. When a girl speaks too boldly, she makes a note. When a woman speaks too little, she wonders why. The quietest moments of the feast happen in these outer rings, where suspicion and strategy ferment under the cover of celebration. Meanwhile, the entertainment continues. A man juggles small knives, his wrists flicking like birds in flight. A woman in a red robe sings in a language few understand, her voice curling above the firelight like incense. These performances do more than impress. They hold attention. They keep certain eyes occupied while others wander. They give you cover to observe. They give your guards time to assess. You call forward a singer from the south who once performed in the court of your enemies. Her voice is soft and mournful, carrying the story of a soldier who never returned home, and the crowd grows still. You watch a general dab at his eye and wonder if it's the song or the wine or a memory he's been carrying too long. You make a note to speak to him later. As the evening deepens, bowls of kumis are replaced with stronger spirits. The room's energy shifts, voices rise, laughter turns louder, looser, and here, in this moment, when the guard of your guests is most relaxed, that's when the most dangerous words are spoken. Small complaints about policy, offhand jokes about command, observations that begin with, "If I were Khan," or "When my father ruled." These are the embers of discontent, small enough to miss unless you're listening for the hiss. But you are always listening. Not directly, of course. You have men for that. Quiet ones who never sit too close to the hearth, but never miss a story. They'll report back later, not in accusations, but in tones and patterns. So-and-so mentioned the grain tax again. He asked about the border tribe movements. He laughed when the courier tripped. You've learned that treason does not begin with banners. It begins with long glances and jokes that linger. Still, you let the feast go on. You raise your bowl, toast the warriors, the cooks, the horses, even the weather. You laugh when you must, and your laughter is sincere. You are not pretending to enjoy yourself. You are simply enjoying it in multiple layers: the food, the music, the company, and the subtle unfolding of the evening's hidden map. By the time the fire has burned low, and only a few voices hum near the corners, you remain seated. Not because you must, but because it's a signal. The Khan does not rise first. That is not etiquette. When at last you stand, all eyes follow. A few more jokes are told after you leave, but not many. The scent of burnt fat lingers. The rugs are stained with spilled drink. The tent feels smaller, heavier, as if some of the laughter has condensed into something less innocent. You step into the night and breathe the open air again. Cold, sharp, honest. What happened inside the yurt tonight was not just a celebration. It was a ledger written without ink. And you've already started tallying who belongs in the next feast and who does not. The throne is not gilded, nor carved from rare wood, nor elevated on steps. It is a thick, faded rug layered over tightly packed earth, with cushions that have traveled as far as you have. Their corners frayed, and their stitching redone by the same women who prepare your meals and your riding clothes. Yet when you sit, this becomes the seat of judgment. No marble is needed. No throne room with domes or fluted columns. Power here is not shown in height, it is shown in stillness. You do not speak first. That is the rule. When the people come before you, petty chieftains arguing over pasture boundaries, a woman accusing her brother-in-law of theft, a soldier begging leniency for his son, they bow. They offer the proper greetings. They kneel. And then they wait. Because when the Khan sits on his rug, judgment begins not with answers, but with the slow, silent weighing of how people carry their guilt, their pride, their desperation. You watch how they shift. You measure how their voices tremble, or do not. And then you begin. The laws are not always written. Many exist as memory, passed from your own mouth into the ears of your judges and scribes, who recall them not as commandments, but as precedents. There is no law code etched into stone to be quoted before you. There is only the mood of the moment, the fairness of the hearing, the gathered wisdom of your court, and your own understanding of what is necessary to keep the whole moving forward. Sometimes you ask questions, sometimes you do not. The decision is yours, and that power is understood, accepted, even by those who hate it. In this court, there are no appeals, no retrials. When a judgment is passed from the rug, it is final. But that is what makes it sacred. The rug may be soft, but the decisions that emerge from it are not. Punishment here does not always mean pain. Sometimes it means exile. Sometimes it means marriage, binding two quarreling families in a knot they cannot undo. Sometimes it means a redistribution of land, or an exchange of herds, or the quiet placement of one clan's hothead son under another chieftain's more careful watch. What matters is not vengeance. What matters is motion. That the empire continues to turn without dragging on the loose stones of a feud left to rot. You do not punish lightly. Your court is known for that. In the early years, your justice was fast and sharp, necessary. Now, your empire is too large to rule by sword alone. Rulings must be understood as fair, even by those who lose. And so you explain more often. You repeat the testimony. You ask the loser if they accept it, not to gain their approval, but to ensure they will not fester. A man who feels heard, even when he loses, is a man who will think twice before rebelling. The carpet under your knees is worn from so many of these hearings. It smells faintly of ash and horsehair, and the dust of places you've long since forgotten. It carries the imprint of hundreds of other feet in knees and elbows. Sometimes you wonder if the rug remembers them, if each fiber has soaked in the regrets and small triumphs of your people. Today, two brothers are fighting over a stretch of river used to water their herds. One claims it was gifted to his family by your own hand a decade ago. The other says the original gift was misinterpreted. You do not raise your voice. You do not consult scrolls. You ask them both to describe, in exact detail, the shape of the stones along the riverbank. One falters. The other recalls a boulder shaped like a sheep's head. You nod. You have been there. You remember it. Your decision is made, and no one questions it. Later, a young girl is brought forward. Her village accuses her of witchcraft, of cursing a man who fell ill. She trembles. She cannot meet your eyes. You ask her only one question. What did she say to the wind the night before the man collapsed? Her answer is a poem, a small one, about longing and loneliness. The court murmurs. You raise your hand. You rule that loneliness is not a crime. You offer her a place in your household instead. The villagers bow, confused but silent. This is your justice, unpredictable to those who seek it for punishment, but predictable in its purpose. To maintain harmony, to prevent stagnation, and to remind everyone that rule is not just about conquest, but about listening. Your carpeted court travels with you, its decisions as mobile as your armies. In one camp, it settles disputes over stolen horses. In another, it intervenes in a brewing blood feud between cousins. Every ruling, though spoken in soft tones, becomes part of your legacy. Not just the man who conquered, no, that is easy to remember, but the man who judged, who balanced, who tried to leave a structure behind, not of stone, but of expectations. Because one day, your sons will sit where you sit now. They will inherit your empire, but more importantly, they will inherit the habits of judgment you have practiced again and again on this rug. The silence before a question, the way you incline your head when listening, the long pause before speaking a verdict that cannot be undone. These will linger longer than the shape of your campaigns or the number of your battles. And beyond the reach of your voice, word travels faster than any messenger. That the Khan rules not with fire, but with thought. That to kneel before him is not humiliation, but an invitation to be heard. That the carpeted throne, low to the ground and lacking in grandeur, holds more power than the highest tower. Tomorrow, more disputes will come. More lives will change with a word. But tonight, as you roll the rug and return to your yurt, the air is still. Your judges retire, the torches dim, and the laws of an empire drift quietly into memory, like footsteps left in sand, shifting perhaps, but unmistakably yours. Your words ride further than your horses ever could, across snow-choked mountain passes, through red deserts where the sand sings, down valleys where the wind has no name. Your empire arrives not with spears, but with paper. A decree sealed in your handprint carries the same weight as your voice, and in most places, more. The people may not know your face, but they know the red ink pressed into the parchment, the falcon crest etched into beeswax, a scent of juniper ash burned to fix the ink. These things announce your will more clearly than trumpets. Within your yurt, nestled between stacks of blankets and bags of dried meat, rests a lacquered chest. It doesn't look like much, chipped in places, the lock rusted from a river crossing months ago. But this chest holds the entire architecture of your empire. Scrolls wrapped in silk, bound in leather, pressed flat between carved wooden slats. Some are written in your own hand, the ink still slightly smudged from when you folded them too quickly. Others are copies made by scribes who travel with you, men and women who have learned to write while swaying on horseback, their fingers trained to steady themselves with knees alone. You open the chest slowly. The smell of ink and dried glue drifts upward. One by one, you lift out the messages. Orders to resettle a rebellious tribe near a friendlier river. A letter to a governor asking after a sick grandchild. A ruling in favor of a merchant caravan delayed too long by local squabbling. And beneath these, the older scrolls, peace treaties with your enemies, back when they still had the nerve to call themselves equals. You read them sometimes, not to remember the wars, but to remind yourself how much diplomacy costs in time, not blood. You run a hand over one of the older ones. The paper is thin but strong, treated with starch and herbs to keep it from crumbling. Your name is written in multiple scripts: Mongolian, Uyghur, Persian, Chinese. You insisted on this, not for vanity, but for clarity. An empire must speak every tongue it rules. A man should be able to read his orders in the language of his mother, even if he serves under your banner. That is why your clerks are so prized. Polyglots who carry dictionaries like others carry knives. Next to the chest sits your seal, carved from blackened horn, shaped like a tiger's eye. No one touches it but you. When you press it into a scroll, you do so slowly, holding your breath, because the meaning doesn't come from the words. It comes from the silence that follows when a rider hands that scroll to a village chief. That pause, that hush, that realization. This is law. This is the Khan's breath, made solid. Your youngest daughter watches you sometimes as you stamp them. She asks why the ink is always red. You tell her it's because red is the color of sun-baked blood. It's not sacred. It's a reminder, not of violence, but of the cost of order. Without it, paper is just wind. Beyond the personal scrolls and laws are the maps. They don't hang in halls like in European palaces. They're rolled, marked, corrected constantly. One shows the routes of postal riders, plotted with tiny dots that snake like veins across the land. Another shows the winter grazing boundaries, redrawn each season based on rainfall, grass growth, births, and burials. The empire doesn't exist in one place. It changes shape with the wind. These maps are your only real borders. You trust your riders more than your armies. They carry silk bags of messages tucked beneath their saddles, changing mounts every 40 miles, sleeping in tents no larger than their cloaks. They remember faces better than names. They can recite messages even if the paper is lost. And they never fail to bow when they deliver a message, even if the man receiving it is 10 ranks below you. Because the seal is higher than any general. It wasn't always this way. You remember when every command had to be delivered by mouth. When a mistake in translation led to a raid that cost you 2 years of trust. That was when you began writing more yourself. Not because you liked it, it cramped your wrist, but because words on paper last longer than memory. Because rumors can be shaped. Because a written message cannot be reshaped in someone else's tone. It arrives silent, final, untouchable. But there's more to the paper than orders. There are letters too, personal ones, tucked behind the law scrolls and the tax records. Letters from Bert, written during long separations. Letters from your sons, unsure how to please you. Letters from childhood companions, long since sent to distant frontiers. They're kept in no special order, bundled with cords or wrapped in scraps of dyed cloth. You don't read them often, but when you do, it's never during the day. You wait for the fire to burn low, for the yurt to still, for the horses to settle. Then you light a small candle, open one bundle, and read a single line aloud, not because you need to hear it, but because it reminds you that your empire is made not of battles, but of people who once rode home. Gold, too, plays its part. It travels not as coin alone, but as thread in garments, as fine cups for honored guests, as the edge of a scroll casing meant for royalty. You don't hoard gold, though others assume you do. You keep it moving. Gold that stays still gathers envy. Gold that moves keeps loyalty oiled. It shines most when used. You use it sparingly. A gold ring to reward a horseman who rode 3 days without sleep. A gold seal gifted to a tribal elder who turned down an offer of rebellion. A small strip of gold in a bride's dowry pouch, hidden beneath wool, never announced, never forgotten. Gold means nothing if it shouts. It means everything when it whispers. In your treasury, not a room, but a pair of chests guarded by men who carry no swords. You keep the true treasures. A scale brought from Baghdad, perfectly balanced. A pen from China, made of hair so fine it writes without a sound. A knife from the northern tundra, never used, only admired. These things aren't for display, they're for memory. You show them only to those who understand that wealth lies not in what glitters, but in what returns to you when given away. You once gave a single gold hairpin to a merchant's daughter in a mountain village. 15 years later, her husband would lead a garrison that saved one of your border cities from collapse. The gold pin was still pinned in her braid when she arrived to greet your envoy. No ceremony, just memory, layered into a life that bent toward your rule. Paper and gold, light things, easy to carry, harder to replace. With them, you rule a territory too wide to see in one lifetime. You rule not just through presence, but through permanence. A letter sent in spring can shift the politics of a valley by summer. A coin given in silence can silence rebellion. A scroll forgotten in the corner of a tent can carry more power than an army if someone chooses to believe it. And belief is what you trade in more than anything else. The belief that the scrolls are fair, that the seals are yours, that the words mean what they say, that someone somewhere is listening. As the night deepens and the messengers retire to their own tents, you sit beside the lacquered chest and press one more seal into warm wax. The fire flickers. The paper curls slightly at the edges. Outside, the guards whisper. A horse stamps against the frozen ground. You fold the scroll, slip it into its case, and place it in the outgoing bundle. Tomorrow, it will ride east. You rise, brush the dust from your knees, and close the chest. It clicks softly. Final. You blow out the lantern and return to the warmth of your blankets. This empire of paper and gold will keep moving, even while you sleep. But before we let it drift into dreams, there's one last thing we should remember. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the cold, wind-bitten hills of Temujin's childhood to the shadowed edges of a blood oath by firelight. From the dust of battlefields to the hush of a judgment given from a carpeted throne. From the clatter of hooves on the steppe to the quiet curl of parchment sealed in wax. A long, slow journey through the breath and bones of an empire that never stood still. If you're still awake, thanks for staying with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the horseblood survival and the whispers inside the Khan's golden yurt, that's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the whole point. If you enjoyed this gentle, sleep-friendly step back through history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. I love seeing how far these quiet stories travel. For now, I'll let the wind on the steppe settle, the tent flaps fall still, and the low coals of the fire glow their last. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.